Chapter 741, The Undead in Tree Heart Space. The Tree Heart Space was just a monotonous darkness. As soon as Saul entered, he felt dampness and oppression, as if he had been buried alive deep in underground soil. But the gentle touch brought by the inverted tree seed quickly relieved his discomfort. If Saul could completely devour the tree seed instead of simply carrying it on his body, he might even come to like this dark and quiet feeling. Unfortunately, the tree seed was prepared for little Algie. After adapting to this place, Saul looked up ahead and saw Bethstana, who only had half a face that was still human. That is, the expressionless wizard Bait he had once seen in the dean's office at Baton Academy. The current Bait was still expressionless, except she had no other body parts besides that expressionless face. Her body had completely transformed into tree branches and had grown many densely packed tiny rootlets that were dizzying to look at. Some of these rootlets hung high, others drooped straight down. These rootlets and branches clustered around Bethstana's head at the center. Wizard Saul, when you came to Kaugus City back then, Baton Academy received you warmly and provided you with much help. Yet now you repay me like this. Bethstana's voice showed no fluctuation, but her words were already full of anger. Saul sneered coldly. Stop pretending, Wizard Bethstana. If I had been subdued by Dean Pond in the outside world, you would probably have been very happy to use me as nourishment to maintain your spirit body, wouldn't you? Saul looked Bethstana up and down, left and right, then suddenly shook his head. Actually, I originally came here wanting to make a deal with you, but now it seems you don't even have the basic qualifications to make a deal. Saul directly abandoned Bethstana and flew to the unconscious Shea's side. At this moment, Shea was holding the tooth of the bone monster Saul had brought back from the Chaos Realm. He had already been contaminated by the radiation from it, and his spirit body was beginning to transform into an evil spirit. Saul took the tooth from Shea's fingertips, pressed it back into his left palm, and sealed the pollution on it. Then his right hand transformed into a tentacle again, directly slapping Shea's face, while his left hand made a light cut, actually separating Shea's head and body directly. After the separation of head and body, Shea's body completely mutated within a breath, becoming a sphere with an uneven surface. Except for the color, it really did resemble the moon somewhat. But this moon quickly began to deform, with its surface rising and falling, finally growing spike after spike. A perfectly good moon had actually donned a hedgehog's skin. Saul quickly discovered characteristics like sharpness and harm on this unconscious evil spirit mass. If ordinary people or wizard apprentices accidentally touched this evil spirit, unhealable wounds would appear on their bodies, causing them to bleed painfully until death. However, before Saul, who was already third rank, this evil spirit formed from part of Shea's mutated spirit body wasn't impressive enough. Saul transferred Shea's head to his left hand. Then the tentacle his right hand had become instantly expanded, becoming enormously large. Like an octopus extending all its tentacles and opening its mouth wide, it directly swallowed the spiked ball. Sharpness and harm had no effect at all. The tentacle directly absorbed it like jelly. After devouring it, the spirit body and pollution were separated within the tentacle. The spirit body was spat out again, while the pollution was retained at the tentacle's tip, finally torn off by Saul and stored in isolation. Saul reattached the clean spirit body to Shea's neck. However, the clean spirit body was like chewed cake, no longer in its original exquisite form. The spirit body part of Shea's body had become a mass of chaotic soft mud. Saul pinched it a couple of times and found it hard to restore to its original shape, so he decided to let Shea handle it himself later. After receiving Saul's treatment, Shea's stagnant consciousness finally began to operate. When he opened his eyes again, The first thing he found unbelievable was Bethstana behind Saul. How did you do it? You actually completely separated the pollution from the spirit body. Saul dragged Shea closer to Bethstana, while secretly being alert for her final resistance. I deal with the dead quite a bit and have seen many souls. For instance, I can now see that your sacrifice didn't achieve the expected results. The closer Saul got to Bethstana, the more he could see that her condition wasn't normal. Bethstana blinked once, and her eyelashes stuck up messily like withered branches. Yes, it was exactly that tooth you gave Shea. Bethstana's voice remained without waves, even though she was discussing her own demise. I originally thought I hadn't come into contact with the pollution on that tooth, and was still mocking Shea's mutual destruction as too reckless. I never imagined that the truly foolish one was myself. From the moment this tooth was exposed to the outside, it began secretly emitting pollution that I couldn't detect or resist. Her face tilted up slightly, as if wanting to look at the sky, but there was only darkness overhead and rootlets swaying constantly due to her movement. I sacrificed everyone in the city, but every time I absorbed a spirit body, the pollution on me would worsen. I can already feel its pollution pervading my rootlets and branches. The abundant spirit body power only makes me feel extremely weak, as if I've lost all strength. Saul freed one hand to support his chin. You're being so detailed. Are you stalling for time? Bethstana's eyes suddenly widened, looking at Saul in disbelief. No need to praise me. Saul waved his hand. Heh. Bethstana, who had shown no emotional fluctuation, suddenly began laughing loudly. So what if you discovered it? I've already sealed the tree heart space. Even if you're third rank, you can't break open the cage I've formed with my life. Since I can't resurrect, then you should all die here to keep me company. The tree heart space suddenly brightened, as if instantly switching from night to day. Around Saul, as far as the eye could see, there were countless, endless tree branches and roots. Somehow, they had already filled the entire tree heart space, forming a cage with no visible boundaries. Only spirit bodies can enter the tree heart space. Your body is still outside. No matter how powerful you are, a body that has lost its soul can be slowly worn down by the inverted tree. Afterward, you'll be trapped here forever, slowly dissipating bit by bit after I die. Bethstana seemed to have given up on resurrection, putting all her strength into confining Saul in the tree heart space's imprisonment. Saul tried to sense his body, but the densely packed branches and rootlets made the entire space seem disconnected from the world. Saul's face showed no panic. After thinking for a moment, he actually continued approaching bait with Shea. The distance between them gradually shortened, 10 meters, 5 meters, 1 meter. Finally, Saul only needed to raise his hand to touch Bait's face. That remaining piece of facial skin. Actually, I still have a way to survive. Saul really did raise his hand, his fingertip almost touching her nose. That is to replace you, become the core of the inverted tree, establish a connection with it, and turn it into my locator, equivalent to becoming another you. A trace of panic flashed across Bethstana's face. However, before she could refute anything, she saw Saul suddenly lower his head and couldn't help laughing. He had a ha. What are you laughing at? I'm laughing. Your acting is really terrible. Saul instantly restrained his laughter. Actually, your real purpose in sealing the tree heart space is to make me voluntarily replace you as the inverted tree's core, right? Bethstana was stunned, opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. Saul tilted his head. Whether you want me to also suffer what you've suffered, or simply hope that after you die from pollution, I can replace you and let the inverted tree continue living. Oh, your eyes tell me it's the latter. If that's the case, then it's even easier to handle. Saul's right fingertip suddenly became a gray, semi-transparent tentacle. I'll give you a second path. Shall we make a deal? Chapter 742, the first of the pentagram. Bethstana's condition was somewhat off. Her voice was muffled, as if she were speaking from inside a box. Her emotions were abnormally negative. Despite the ongoing sacrifice outside still creating carnage, she seemed convinced she couldn't resurrect. But this completely contradicted her previous decisive launch of the citywide sacrifice. When she had just tried to drag Saul and Shea to die with her, she still had final determination. Upon hearing Saul say there was a second path, it was as if all the strength had drained from her body. Anyway, besides trusting me, you have no other options, do you? Bethstana's eyeballs turned with difficulty. Trusting you would just make me your test subject. Deals naturally require a price, but it's different from the test subject you imagine. You can survive rationally, though your freedom will be restricted. However, I can guarantee that after you serve me for 100 years, I'll grant you freedom. While Bethstana was still hesitating, Saul was already quietly probing her condition with mental power. He needed to be careful that Bethstana wasn't secretly employing some means, and her hesitant, fragile, and sensitive state really didn't seem like that of a third-rank wizard. At this time, when his mental power swept over a shadow tightly wrapped by rootlets behind Bethstana, his mental power suddenly felt a burning sensation, as if scalded by something. "What is that?" Saul was curious. Who knew Bethstana would directly answer him. "It's the wishing candle." Wishing candle. Saul had never heard of this thing, but why did Bethstana actually answer him? Could this person have gone mad? Reminded by Saul, Bethstana remembered the wishing candle she had just obtained from Shea. "This thing is useless to me." She used tree branches to hand a white candle to Saul, and I still have to bear the cost of using it. Saul first scanned the seemingly ordinary candle with mental power, then took it. Just then, the candle suddenly lit with a hiss. At the same time, Saul's heart stirred, and he opened his left hand. A dark red thick leather book appeared in his palm. Lunar calendar year 320, May 15th, clear. Wishing candle. Cursed object. Each time the flame lights, you can make a wish. It will summon from the void an item helpful to realizing your wish. But it doesn't guarantee your wish can be fulfilled. However, as the person who makes a wish and blows out the candle, one of your negative emotions will be amplified. The harder the wish is to fulfill, the stronger your negative emotions become, until your soul is completely twisted, finally becoming the candle's wick. Saul looked at Shea, who was still unconscious beside him, and Bethstana, who had lost her fighting spirit in front of him, finally understanding how these two people's personality abnormalities had been caused. The emotion amplified in Bethstana should be despair. As for Shea, probably paranoia. After the dead wizard's diary appeared in Saul's palm, Bethstana had been staring at the diary. Saul closed the diary and directly pressed one corner of the hardcover book against Bethstana's remaining facial skin. "You have no time left. If you agree to the deal, then relax and don't resist. If you disagree, let's fight to the death again." After speaking, Saul didn't wait for bait to consider and immediately used the dead wizard's diary to absorb Bethstana's soul. Bethstana had once been a third-rank wizard after all, and currently wasn't in a completely dead state. If she resisted, the diary might indeed be unable to absorb her spirit body. But the diary was only slightly obstructed before quickly absorbing Bethstana's soul, turning her into Saul's fifth black page. Having lost Bethstana, the rootlets completely transformed her last bit of body into tree roots. At the same time, the inverted tree, now without a controller, began growing wildly, wrapping up both Saul and Shea beside him in just a few seconds. This tree heart space also began trembling unstably. The inverted tree, without Bethstana's control, began growing randomly according to its mood. If it could no longer be controlled, it might evolve into a terrifying third-rank monster that devoured human souls everywhere. Wake up, it's your turn next. Saul grabbed the unconscious Shea, spun him twice in the air, and threw him hard into the central position where Bethstana had just been. Shea suddenly opened his eyes just before being thrown into the tree heart, as if he had been pretending to be unconscious all along. Yet Saul didn't even ask and was about to throw him into the inverted tree. Poor Shea couldn't say a word before being absorbed by the inverted tree that had suddenly lost its core. However, he did indeed need the inverted tree. Despite his inner resentment, he obediently stabilized with the tree seed. Shea opened his eyes. He had just spoken one word when he saw in shock that Saul was swinging his fist to hit him. "What are you doing?" Similarly unable to finish his sentence, Shea was again distracted by the red beam of light on Saul's fist. Shea's vision immediately turned completely red, and even his consciousness fell into brief stagnation. This stagnation didn't last very long, seeming only like the blink of an eye before the blinding red light disappeared. When Shea could see everything clearly again, Saul was already standing leisurely across from him, holding a dark red hardcover book in his hands, his movements elegant and temperament calm. As if the person who had just been swinging fists to hit people wasn't him at all. "What exactly did you just do? Did you plant some explosives in my body, or did you curse me?" Saul wasn't surprised by Shea's series of questions. But he didn't immediately address the other party. Only after confirming that Kelly's auxiliary formation had completed its integration with Shea did he look up. "This is one of my transformation attempts, and also a method to ensure you won't follow Bethstana's old path afterward." Shea was still in the core of the inverted tree at this moment, without even a body of his own. Although he had been tempted by Saul to steal Bethstana's inverted tree as support for his own resurrection. In fact, he didn't have very clear plans for how to resurrect himself. Even someone as powerful as third-rank wizard Bethstana hadn't managed to resurrect using the inverted tree. Could he, a first-rank, though he considered himself a genius, really accomplish what a third-rank wizard couldn't? For now, he could only trust Saul. Saul knew Shea still didn't trust him, if not for the fact that the other party had already been parasitized by the star-shaped eye. He would have already run to other parts of the inverted tree to avoid Saul. Saul took out the wishing candle. The candle hadn't yet extinguished and seemed to be tempting Saul to quickly make a wish. But Saul didn't make a wish. Instead, he returned it to Shea. Shea looked at Saul in disbelief. He thought no one could resist the temptation of the wishing candle, yet Saul had given him the candle without making a single wish. "Can you move now? If not, I can help you keep this candle for now." Shea hastily tried with all his might, and finally managed to manipulate two thin, soft rootlets to take back the candle from Saul's hand. Even having gotten the candle, he still felt it was unreal. The wishing candle that everyone covets, why don't you want it? Is something that curses you to lose part of your sanity with each wish really a good thing? As a wizard, being able to control your own brain and rationality is most important. After reading the diary's introduction to the wishing candle, Saul had decided not to use it. No cheat was more important than a wizard's brain. However, Saul was interested in something else. "I'm returning the candle to you. In exchange, give me that crystal bottle." Shea was stunned. He didn't know how Saul knew about that crystal bottle, since Saul hadn't been in the space at all at that time. "I can give it to you, but I'm not very clear on what that bottle of water actually does. You'll need to research it yourself." Shea struggled to use tree branches to bring the previous crystal bottle to Saul. Saul watched Shea's difficult movements. "Looking at your condition, it will take a long time to adapt, but I can't stay in the tree heart space watching you forever. Having retrieved the most important wishing candle, Shea was much calmer. He could finally speak rationally. What do you need me to do? Stop the external sacrifice, retract all tree branches, and make a big commotion. Shea didn't know what Saul wanted to do, but now he was on the same boat as Saul and could only say, I'll do my best. Chapter 743, Symphony of Fate. But the tree heart space began to boil. The rootlets that had been quietly hanging in the center swayed gently, like willow branches by a river. But in the gloomy tree heart space, this scene wasn't beautiful. A decaying and dejected mental power spread outward from Shea as the core, gradually extending beyond the tree heart space. Though invisible, Saul could sense that the microformations he had left inside the inverted tree and in Kaugast's inner city had all gone silent. Obviously, the chaos outside was beginning to subside. However, forcibly stopping the sacrifice that had already begun made the inverted tree, already weakened by Bethstana's torment, even worse off. Only because Shea was still in the tree heart trying his best to comfort it, did the inverted tree not erupt. Even so, the constantly swaying rootlets showed the inverted tree's restlessness and unease. Losing the souls gained from sacrifice was like making someone who had been hungry for 3 days and had just eaten half a steamed bun stop eating. It was simply inhumane. After a moment, the irritable inverted tree gradually calmed down. The howling sound that had always existed in the darkness also gradually stopped. You're picking this up quite quickly, Saul praised. For Shea, a first-rank wizard, to calm the inverted tree so quickly obviously showed exceptional mental power talent. Shea's weak voice came through. I've already retracted all the tree roots and confined them within Baton Academy. Now from the outside, this place looks like a withered and dense evil forest. As long as you don't burn down this forest, people outside the city won't be able to see whatever you do. Saul nodded with satisfaction. Then he restrained his smile, his expression becoming solemn. He crossed his 10 fingers in front of his chest, then quickly pulled them apart to both sides. 10 red lines of light were drawn from his palms. With a light shake of his wrists, the light automatically formed a pentagram pattern in midair. The formation took shape and began flashing intermittently. The frequency grew faster and faster. Between the light and dark flashes, it nearly blinded Shea's eyes. Unable to continue watching the pentagram formation in the air or see Saul behind it clearly, he simply closed his external visual perception and quietly waited for Saul to operate. As time passed, Shea gradually felt an indescribable force connecting him with that pentagram formation. Though he wasn't looking, the appearance of the pentagram formation was clearly displayed in his mind. At the same time, his lifeless spirit body suddenly became full, as if he had truly resurrected. After an unknown amount of time, Shea slowly opened his eyes. This time he truly opened his eyes. The feedback from muscle and nerve involvement was so clear. It was a reality that spirit-body state lacked. Shea looked down and saw his torso and limbs. He actually had a body again. Shea looked up at Saul excitedly, but saw the other party shake his head. You haven't completely resurrected yet. You're just borrowing the inverted tree to reshape your body. Shea's body was actually different from a normal person's. Most obviously, he had roots. Behind him, several rootlets connected to his body like blood vessels. This was what others could see. But inside Shea's body, there were thin threads that others, including himself, couldn't see. These threads ran through all the important organs of his body, then emerged from the cracks in his skull, with some connecting to the inverted tree. But one special thread connected to Saul. This thread was intermittent, seemingly broken but actually connected by invisible force, like a dotted line drawn in the air. This dotted line was different from the lines extending from Byron, Kismet, and others toward Saul. Others' fate lines extended to within reach near Saul. By reaching out to touch them, Saul could sense some of their information or directly teleport. But they weren't directly connected to Saul's fate lines. The dotted line extending from Shea, however, was wound around Saul's fate line. And this was precisely the result of Saul using the pentagram formation just now. Saul had connected his fate with Shea's in a one-way link. This connection method came from the method the original owner of the dead wizard's diary used to advance to fourth rank, the pentagram formation, death weaving. But Saul hadn't completely replicated death weaving. Death weaving essentially involved selecting 5 special locations in the world, first using the diary's ability to perceive fate to link these 5 places together. Then at the right moment, create massive destructive disasters, turning these 5 places into living hells all at once. The large number of death spirits created by the disasters would become increasingly powerful under the mutual influence of death weaving, while simultaneously feeding back to create greater disasters and more deaths. Finally, the repeatedly refined death power would be transmitted to the diary along the channels created by death weaving, and ultimately feed back to the diary's owner. If Saul followed the diary's original owner's advancement route exactly, he would definitely need to slaughter over 1 million people. This wizard world wasn't Saul's previous life with population explosion. The death of several million people would be enough to cause massive upheaval in this world. Saul was unwilling. Moreover, Saul had once used the nightmare butterfly's power to see part of the diary's history. In that history, the diary's original owner advanced to 5th rank with corpses piled like mountains beneath his feet. But he was also stuck at a certain level with no hope of advancement. Finally, he had no choice but to abandon even the dead wizard's diary. Therefore, after studying the advancement principles of death weaving, Saul decided to combine his own ability characteristics and his spirit bodies that could be called monstrous in this world to transform death weaving. He gave his new advancement method a name, Symphony of Fate. The biggest difference between Symphony of Fate and death weaving was that fate wasn't just death. Changes in fate, new beginnings, and endings all produced enormous energy. This energy could only be perceived by Saul's fate lines. He called it causal energy. Saul connected his fate lines to specially chosen objects through the pentagram, forming a one-way channel for transmitting energy. Shea, who had become the new core of the inverted tree, was a very suitable candidate. The inverted tree gave Shea a guarantee of survival, and the wishing candle gave him means to solve difficulties. Combined with Shea's own talent, methods, and character, Saul believed he would definitely live a very exciting life. The more turbulent Shea's fate, the more vigorous the feedback energy to Saul would be. Theoretically, if Saul completed 5 associated objects and used the pentagram formation to link them all together again, these 5 objects would also interact with each other, giving him extremely powerful causal force while not bearing the entanglements of this causal force. The key to all this lay with Saul. This symphony of fate advancement method couldn't be replicated by others. Of course, all this was still just imagination on paper. Saul couldn't even guarantee that the first experiment on Shea would succeed. Everything still needed time to verify. Currently, this experimental process was going smoothly without any sudden problems. After Shea finished admiring his new body, his face showed unstoppable joy, and he became increasingly trusting of Saul. However, Shea soon had new troubles. The pollution inside the inverted tree is so terrible. How did Bethstana endure it before? Before he could be proud for long, a pain like being soaked in strong acid drilled in from every pore of Shea's body. making his expression twist with agony. If this continues, I'm afraid it won't be long before I'm polluted, mutated, and turned back into a monster. Shea was very anxious. Having finally gotten a chance at life, he never wanted to taste death again. Don't worry. The severe pollution now is because Bethstana just launched a citywide sacrifice, and the inverted tree absorbed a large number of living souls. I'll help you clear the pollution in your body. After that, as long as you don't use the inverted tree to absorb souls in large quantities again, you won't produce so much pollution. As long as you recover your strength quickly, you can withstand low levels of pollution. Shea nodded repeatedly. Although he was still very uncomfortable now, as long as there was a solution, he wasn't afraid. I really admire Bethstana now. Having stayed here so long, she only went mad rather than insane. Shea didn't know he was already much luckier than Bethstana. Saul looked down at the diary in his palm. You have something to say. Saul, I have clues about fate lines. Could you grant me freedom in 10 years rather than 100? Chapter 744. Been waiting for you for ages. Saul was quite satisfied with her initiative. If the clues you provide have sufficient value. Bethstana didn't realize that when she was within the diary's black pages, she had no secrets from Saul. If Saul wanted, he could even ask her most intimate secrets. And she wouldn't even have the chance to refuse to answer. However, Saul was still willing to give her this opportunity. When he performed the Symphony of Fate, he hadn't shielded Bethstana from perceiving the outside world, precisely wanting to see what this third-rank wizard understood about it. After learning about Bethstana's experiences, he hoped this powerful third-rank wizard could be of use to him. Even if she couldn't become a nominal servant but actual partner like Anne, Agu, and Herman, they could still have a mutually beneficial relationship. The inverted tree is not a product of this world. In ancient times, even earlier than the Dark Moon calendar, civilizations from other worlds once visited our world. According to limited records, they suddenly launched attacks on the wizard forces of that time. After being defeated, they withdrew from our world, and the spatial passages were also sealed. But this inverted tree remained, and eventually became the foundation and inheritance of our Baton Academy. I once saw exposed fate lines on people controlled by the inverted tree. Is this also the inverted tree's ability? So you have already seen them. It seems you deliberately let me witness your control over fate lines. Yes, after all, I'm also very interested in the inverted tree's power. If you can cooperate fully, it will also help me better utilize the inverted tree. While Saul was communicating with Bethstana, Shea nearby began to feel tired after his initial excitement wore off. He even couldn't help but yawn. Seeing this, Saul knew Shea needed proper rest to adapt to his new body and new partner. He said to Shea, "You've just become the core of the inverted tree and need good rest. I'll do my best to create a stable environment for you. When your condition stabilizes, then." Saul thought for a moment, tore off a small gray semi-transparent tentacle from his body, and handed it to Shea. "Contact me through this. After I receive the signal, I'll come over as soon as possible or send someone else." Shea nodded. But before his eyelids closed, Shea suddenly thought of something and used a branch to bring out a transparent crystal bottle containing a small amount of transparent liquid like clear water. "You got the inverted tree but still came back to help me. Though I'm not much of a person, I know gratitude. This is elf spring water I just obtained through the wishing candle. I can't use this thing now, so I'm giving it to you." Saul took the elf spring water, somewhat surprised. The wishing candle could actually obtain items that were nearly extinct in this world. Were the items obtained by this wishing candle transmitted through spatial transfer, or were they taken from somewhere they were hidden? It was very rare now to see magical tools related to elves. since ordinary people didn't dare possess such items to avoid suffering the same curse as the elves. Wait, Shea suddenly offering to give me this thing. He wouldn't be trying to pass a hot potato to me, would he? Saul suddenly raised his hand and stared at Shea. Seeing Shea's somewhat guilty expression, Saul knew he probably hadn't guessed wrong. Never mind. Even if Saul couldn't use this thing, he could keep it as a tool for tricking people. Then I'll accept it. Shea silently breathed a sigh of relief before continuing to prepare for dormancy. Watching Shea use branches and rootlets to wrap himself up tightly, though not very skillfully, and the entire space becoming quiet, Saul left the inverted tree. When he reappeared on the large tree stump, he found that the originally bare trunk was now completely wrapped in branches and roots. The two had grown together and could no longer be distinguished from each other, covering the entire tree stump with its 100-meter diameter beneath. Saul flew to high altitude again. The entire Baton Academy was covered by withered yet dense branches, with only some tall buildings still showing a bit of their roofs and towers. Now we just wait for the fruit to slowly ripen and see whether it bears sweet or bitter fruit. He squinted slightly, and several semi-transparent thin lines suddenly appeared in his field of vision. Saul recognized the one belonging to Kelly and was about to touch it when he suddenly saw another thin line. He chuckled and touched the other one. Then Saul's figure appeared in a corner of Kaugust's outer city. This place had become a wasteland, with terrible deep holes and huge fissures covering the ground. Incomplete bodies were scattered on the ground, walls, and rooftops. There were also lucky survivors huddled in corners, trembling and looking terrified. Although these people had survived Bethstana's sacrifice, they would probably never escape today's shadow for the rest of their lives. Suddenly, an orange figure emerged from a crack in the wall and crashed into Saul's chest. Banged! What bastard dares to block? The orange cat's cursing stopped abruptly. He stared with round, bulging eyes, completely unable to believe what he was seeing. The Black Blade wizard who had been imprisoned by Baton Academy's dean and unable to resist had actually appeared before him. Saul smiled slightly and once again lifted Kate by the scruff of her neck. You ran too slowly. I've been waiting for you for ages. Come with me. Kate immediately began struggling. He didn't think Saul waiting for him could be anything good. After all, when the other party had just been trapped by Baton Academy's dean, he had run away. Although the two of them had no particular relationship to begin with, and he had no obligation to save Saul. But he didn't think Saul wouldn't resent his desertion in the face of danger. Well, Black Blade wizard, I think since we've already escaped, we should each go our separate ways. He couldn't finish his words. He heard Saul say, I've never brought anyone know any cat before, but I can try. Then Saul once again touched the thin line belonging to Kelly in front of him. The next second he appeared before Kelly, still carrying a cat that had fainted. The first thing that caught his eye was a rabbit roasted golden brown on the outside and tender inside. Smells good. You actually have this skill. Saul was in a good mood. He threw the half-dead orange cat near the campfire, then unceremoniously stepped forward to tear off a leg and start eating. After tasting it, the flavor was actually quite good. Kelly was startled by Saul's sudden appearance, but relaxed after hearing his voice. These past few years, whenever I attended gatherings and got bored, I would sneak into the kitchen to watch them cook. After watching enough, I learned. Watching Saul eat the rabbit leg unceremoniously and ungracefully, Kelly looked at the row of people standing behind Saul, hesitated, then said, maybe you should eat later. Someone's waiting for you. Saul naturally knew there were people behind him watching, but he had been busy for over a day without eating anything. Not hungry, but craving food. He smiled, and without any intention of tidying his appearance, directly turned around with the rabbit leg in hand to see four strangers. Agu and Anne stood between the four people and Kelly, faithfully carrying out their task of protecting Kelly. Among the four strange wizards, the leading man immediately bowed upon seeing Saul turn around. "No problem, please enjoy your meal first. We're not in a hurry." Shadu smiled kindly with a touch of humility. Chapter 745, Invitation from the Tribunal. We came to investigate the problem of Kaugust and Baton Academy secretly cultivating high-risk demonic creatures. However, it seems this disaster has already been resolved by you, Lord Saul. Saul looked back at distant Kaugust. Resolved. Perhaps for the tribunal, the biggest uncertainty factor had already been controlled by Saul. Unless they still wanted to snatch the inverted tree from Saul's hands, the source of this uprising had indeed been eliminated, but the disaster caused by the inverted tree hadn't been resolved yet. There were no living people left in Kaugust's inner city, though there should still be some survivors in the outer city. For them, this sacrifice was the real disaster. "Will the tribunal send people in to search for survivors?" Saul asked. Shadu across from him shook his head very decisively. If they were ordinary people, they would have been completely polluted the moment the inverted tree erupted. Even if they're still alive now, they only have one breath left. As for wizards, those who were still alive when you stopped the disaster were naturally saved. They'll come out on their own. This was the terrifying nature of wizards. For ordinary people, encountering a wizard's slaughter was more terrible than encountering a natural disaster. Even if they didn't die directly in the disaster, they would die afterward from various radiation pollution caused by wizards. "I was naive," Saul laughed self-mockingly. "You stopped the disaster from spreading. This isn't naivety, it's nobility." Shadu smiled, shamelessly flattering Saul. Even Saul, the one being praised, felt it was ironic, yet the other party looked completely natural. Then Shadu changed the subject. "May I ask, has Baton Academy's dean already been executed by you?" "He's already dead." "That's good. With the inverted tree in your hands, we can rest assured." Shadu hinted to Saul that the tribunal wouldn't compete with him for the inverted tree. Then he extended an invitation to Saul. "Additionally, Lord Saul, our chief Phrim would like to invite you to the tribunal for a meeting. When would be convenient for you?" The tribunal chief, inviting Saul to the tribunal. To set up the pentagram formation for the Symphony of Fate, Saul indeed had plans to visit the Nephrit continent. But not now. Little Algie was still waiting for his tree seed. However, an invitation from a fourth-rank wizard couldn't be casually refused. Kelly, who had been quietly listening to Saul's conversation with the tribunal members, now stood up somewhat nervously. She had heard Saul mention that the rebellion at Gorsa's Wizard Tower might also have some connection to the tribunal. She just didn't know what their attitude toward Saul was now. Saul considered for a moment. "I would indeed be willing to visit the tribunal to meet the chief, but I currently have very important matters to handle and cannot depart immediately." Shadu quickly smiled and said, "It's my fault for not being clear. Since we're inviting you, if you have matters to handle, naturally you should handle your affairs first. Of course, we still hope you can come to Nephrit within a year. We can send a special airship to pick you up at any time." The other party spoke very politely, but also clearly gave Saul a 1-year time limit. Domineering as always. "I understand." Saul put away his smile and nodded slightly. Shadu smiled and bowed again, then left with the 3 wizards behind him who had remained silent throughout. "What do the tribunal people want with you?" Kelly was somewhat worried. Watching the departing figures of the tribunal members, Saul took a bite of the rabbit leg. "Either it's related to the borderland, or it's related to Master Gorsa. Should we go find Tower Master Gorsa for help? Isn't he at the Sighing Wall? That's much closer than Nefret, Kelly suggested. But Saul shook his head. He may not have time. When they parted last time, Master Gorsa had clearly told Saul that after returning, he would prepare to advance to 4th rank. This was absolutely the most important matter for Master Gorsa at present. Saul didn't want to trouble him with his own affairs or disturb his advancement. He also hoped Master Gorsa would advance quickly. After all, which was more impressive, a 4th rank master or a 3rd rank master? Was there even a need to consider? Then I'll accompany you when the time comes. Kelly puffed out her small chest, still holding more than half of the roasted rabbit. Anne and Agu didn't express their opinions. Regardless, wherever Saul was, they would definitely be there too. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Saul waved the rabbit leg in his hand. Let's eat first. The two ate while chatting about their respective experiences. So where do we go next? Are you taking the inverted tree back with you? Kelly sucked on her fingers. Saul hadn't told her about the Symphony of Fate. Knowing such things would only be a burden for her and wouldn't benefit her advancement. I've already entrusted the inverted tree to a capable person to watch over. We'll return to the borderland first. Senior Byron is also there. After a pause, Saul asked her, "Are you willing to come with me to the borderland? I've established a wizard tower there, though there aren't many people currently." Kelly pulled at the corner of her mouth. This is the first time I've seen a kidnapper ask for the kidnapped person's opinion. After speaking, she somewhat unnaturally brushed her hair that gleamed with metallic luster. "As long as you don't mind that I'm still only 1st rank and can't help you much." Saul immediately showed a disgusted expression. "I definitely mind, but aren't you preparing to advance? How about this? If you can't advance within 3 months, I'll hang you at the top of the wizard tower as a flag, okay?" Why a flag? Kelly was confused by Saul, but suddenly realized and punched Saul's shoulder. "Flag your sister." "Oh my, how can a dignified marquis use profanity?" "I learned it from you. By the way, should we roast this cat together?" "Better not, it's quite expensive." The two talked and laughed, bickered and made noise, as if returning to their time as wizard apprentices, completely forgetting the pressure from the tribunal. Agu and Anne stood aside watching, finding it both amusing and enviable. Wizards were inherently people whose rationality overwhelmed emotion. How many could maintain such pure feelings after advancing to 3rd rank? Master advanced too quickly and too smoothly. He doesn't have much of the bearing of a 3rd rank wizard, Agu sighed. Anne rolled her eyes at him disapprovingly. Bearing is something only people with pretense but no real strength need to intimidate others. I think Master is just fine as he is now. The evil wizard Saul, returning with the inverted tree seed and a kidnapped female marquis, didn't know that Byron, who was guarding the Purity Wizard Tower, had suddenly had a dream. 1 second, Byron was still buried in his laboratory, conducting a complex cultivation experiment. But the next second, he suddenly lost consciousness and crashed headfirst onto the experiment table. The bottles and vials in his hands also fell to the ground and shattered. In the dark space, a phantom, water ripple-like humanoid shadow suddenly appeared. The shadow was colorful and constantly changing colors as it swayed. Just looking at it made Byron dizzy. But Byron wasn't nervous. He had seen such scenes before. He quickly realized he had fallen asleep, and passively so, because such scenes had occurred many times over the past 2 years. However, what he hadn't expected was that this time, the human figure in front of him actually spoke. "Hello, Byron." Byron asked expressionlessly, "Who are you?" The figure across from him was quiet for a moment. "I've forgotten most of it, you can just call me half-elf." Byron's eyes widened slightly. Did anyone still remember the half-elf? Chapter 746, Elf Spring Water. Have I gone mad? He didn't converse with the figure claiming to be a half-elf, but muttered to himself. Although I've long noticed some mental problems, I didn't expect to go crazy so quickly. Going crazy to this extent should mean mutation. But does a person's consciousness remain clear after mutation? Or is it that after I mutate, my spirit consciousness is actually trapped in a closed space within my brain? I really want to record all of this. Half-elf. The half-elf was encountering someone who gave up on treatment the moment they saw him for the first time. You haven't mutated yet, though you already have tendencies in that direction. The half-elf waited for Byron to stop talking to himself before speaking. I'm not dangerous enough to cause an ordinary wizard to instantly mutate. I'm not an ordinary wizard, Byron said with certainty. I'm using your elf king's head. It's precisely because of this that I can communicate with you directly. You said you're a half-elf, right? Why isn't an elf coming to communicate with me? Byron immediately asked. I'm not looking down on your bloodline, but in elf society, the elf king shouldn't think much of half-elves, right? How could there be you hidden in his skull? This time, the colorful phantom took a while before speaking. Have I not communicated with people for too long? I'm not within the elf king's skull, just communicating with you through this medium. As for why it's me, because now only I still remember how to communicate with people. It seems the elves are really all having a hard time. You've appeared in my dreams many times, and this is the first time you've spoken. Is there something you need? We just discovered the aura of elf spring water. This is very important for both you and us. Elf spring water. Byron became serious. Ever since he started using the Elf King's head as his new locator, he had been paying attention to elf legends. Among them, although elf spring water wasn't the most frequently mentioned item in legends, it was a very important thing. It was said that in the most prosperous places of the elves, with elf spring water, the elves were equivalent to having a second life. However, before the lunar calendar, elf spring water had gradually begun to dry up, eventually becoming a legendary item. Elf spring water had many functions, and one of the functions Byron valued most was its calming effect on elf mental power. Using the Elf King's head as a new locator was an extremely risky move, but Byron, who had lost his original locator and body at the time, had no choice. After obtaining the Elf King's head, although Byron successfully advanced to true wizard, due to the side effects brought by the elves, he had never dared to continue advancing. If he could obtain elf spring water, at least he would dare to continue trying. So upon hearing news of elf spring water, even Byron became excited. No wizard didn't want to continue advancing, and many wizards were willing to risk their lives for it. Byron was one of them. Where is it? Is it in the borderland? I don't know. Byron frowned. Then how do you sense that elf spring water has appeared? We just know. You're being unreasonable. The half-elf saw that Byron was angry and had to explain to him. Before the elves' incident, there wasn't a single drop of elf spring water left in this world. So when new elf spring water appears, we can sense it immediately. The spring water that appeared this time is very likely to have been sealed away or may not even be from this world. Then what does elf spring water look like, and how should I find it? Elf spring water looks just like ordinary spring water, but when it appears near you, you'll definitely be able to recognize it. Mental sensing again. It's always like this. You elves always live so dependently on intuition. The half-elf stopped talking. His energy seemed to no longer allow him to have much more communication with Byron. Being able to explain so much to him was already the half-elf's current limit. Byron opened his eyes and got up from the table. Looking at the mess before him, he silently organized everything, then randomly piled materials he didn't need for now in a corner of the room. I need to go out too, Byron said as soon as he left his room, going to find the busy steward Hope. Very well, Lord Byron. Where are you going? Do you need a vehicle? Or do you need me to send a few apprentices with you? If Tower Master returns, do you need me to leave him a message? The steward asked a series of questions. But Byron just stared at Hope without speaking. Hope took a deep breath. All right, when are you departing? Now. Hope immediately turned and pulled over a passing wizard apprentice. Camilla, go lead the magic wolf to the exit. When you pass the first floor, have Minz prepare 200 magic crystals. After doing this, Hope turned back to smile at Byron. Byron nodded, thank you. He returned to his laboratory to pack some necessities, then put on his cloak and went directly downstairs to the first floor exit. At this time, the magic wolf was already lying at the door, while a thin boy nearby was holding a bag of magic crystals with a pained expression. Byron didn't know who he was. There were now many more people in the wizard tower, and Byron only recognized the 2 wizard apprentices who served as his assistants. He stepped forward to take the magic crystals, mounted the magic wolf, and prepared to depart. However, before he could urge the magic wolf to rise, he suddenly heard familiar bird calls from overhead. Just as he looked up, his vision blurred, and Saul actually teleported in front of him. Senior Byron, I'm back. What's this, you're going out? Saul was still carrying an unconscious orange cat. Yes, I'm going too. Byron was about to tell Saul through secret speech that he was going to search for elf spring water when he suddenly sensed a peculiar aura on Saul. The half-elf had said that as long as elf spring water appeared near Byron, he would be able to sense it. And now, how was Byron sensing the aura of spring water on Saul? Senior Byron, the familiar voice came from overhead again. Byron instinctively looked up. The sunlight overhead was somewhat dazzling, and he could only see the silhouette of a large bird and a person on it. That person's red hair was quite striking, like a ball of flame. The giant bird quickly landed beside Byron and Saul. The red-haired girl he hadn't seen in years was riding on the bird's back, excitedly waving her arms at him. Brought back. For a moment, Byron didn't know which matter to ask Saul about first. Inside the Purity Wizard Tower, Steward Hope was reconciling accounts with Minz, the second-level wizard apprentice responsible for financial bookkeeping. The Purity Wizard Tower was now the strongest force within the borderland. The tower had more and more personnel, and Rhine City outside was also rapidly developing and expanding. Although the Wizard Tower now owned many more properties and magical resources, they had to be even more careful and cautious with spending. Just halfway through reconciling, Hope suddenly felt a familiar mental power fluctuation from behind. He turned around in surprise and saw Byron walking quickly upstairs. Lord Byron, did you forget to bring something? Byron walked to Hope's side and paused. No, I've returned from my trip. Hope opened his mouth and could only say, welcome back. Byron continued upstairs with hurried steps. Minz on the side quietly asked Hope, Steward, may I go ask Lord Byron for those 200 magic crystals back? Chapter 747, The Second Target. Saul hadn't expected that Byron's rare opportunity for a long trip would be killed by him just like that. After discovering the elf spring water on Saul, Byron immediately asked for it. Saul didn't waste words and directly handed the spring water to Byron. He believed Byron's current understanding of elves was definitely more than his own. Those dangerous precautions didn't need to be explained one by one. Then Saul had Hope arrange food and lodging for Kelly, while he himself went up to the laboratory on the 5th floor. After entering the laboratory, Saul immediately began examining the Symphony of Fate formation he had designed. After observing for a while, he nodded with satisfaction. Currently, the entire formation is operating smoothly, and the connection with Shea hasn't weakened due to increased distance. The signal is very stable. Saul took out paper and pen and recorded the entire process of this experiment and the problems encountered along the way. This time he specifically organized a dedicated notebook. If his Symphony of Fate could completely pry open the door to fourth rank advancement, he would use this as basis and foundation to continue advancing toward fifth and sixth rank. The accidental trip to the prismatic world last time had greatly touched Saul. Those star-shaped eyes said they could be first rank or sixth rank. Strength could be freely transformed. But the essence of all this was having stable sixth rank power. Saul still didn't understand what sixth rank meant. He currently only knew that fifth rank seemed to allow traversing different worlds. But now the path to fifth rank was completely hidden, and existing fourth rank wizards were all struggling to find advancement methods. Only Saul, as someone who also possessed clear fate line abilities, could walk a special advancement path. His experience and a bit of intuition told him that as long as he continued exploring along fate lines, he could also become sixth rank like the star-shaped eyes in the prismatic world. However, Saul was still in the initial stage. The overall strategy could be set at sixth rank, but actual implementation could only aim for fourth rank. He took out the dead wizard's diary, spread it on the table, and turned to the page where Bethstana was located. The previous page was exactly the black page formed by combining the partial souls left by Narella and Peyer, who had once pretended to be wind sprites. Saul very much wanted to communicate with the consciousness of the prismatic world again, to better verify his advancement ideas. Now, since Peyer in this world hadn't been able to contact Peyer in the distant prismatic world, he could only think of other ways to understand the power of fate lines more deeply. It would be even better if Bethstana's information could help him contact the prismatic world through Peyer. Now you can continue. Very well. The inverted tree is a wood attribute demonic creature, but its application of fate lines is the most thorough I've ever seen. Of course, now the most powerful user of fate lines I've seen is you, Wizard Saul. Speaking of this, Bethstana was somewhat puzzled. Also, this book of yours can actually completely preserve my consciousness. Even the extremism caused by the inverted tree's pollution has been completely removed. I can't believe a third-rank wizard could possess such a powerful magical tool. No matter how you look at this book, it's at least fourth rank in value. Saul thought, the diary's special features don't stop there. If I let you see the golden pages that can preview the future, the diary that can judge changes in storm eyes and anchor points, it should be at least fifth rank. He cleared his throat. You don't need to worry about these things. Currently, you just need to know I need knowledge related to fate lines. Understood. Actually, during the period when I was combined with the inverted tree. Saul quietly listened to Bethstana describe the power and perceptions she gained within the inverted tree, which indeed had parts closely related to fate lines. For example, people controlled by the inverted tree had their fate lines pulled out from their bodies by the tree, which then influenced them. This made them appear like normal people most of the time. But if the inverted tree needed them, it could manipulate them to act according to the tree's will. At the same time, if the inverted tree needed souls, these people would transform from puppets into nourishment for the tree. The city-wide sacrifice Bethstana had launched was the complete development of the latter ability, pushing it to the limit regardless of consequences. Saul suddenly became curious. I remember in the tree heart space, you told me the wishing candle was something you snatched from Shea, and your later negativity should also have been caused by the wishing candle's curse. What wish did you make at that time? I naturally hoped I could successfully resurrect. But perhaps I used it incorrectly, making a wish too difficult to fulfill. Although the wishing candle produced a bottle of liquid, I still couldn't complete resurrection through that liquid. Instead, I fell into despair, which is why after discovering you entered the tree heart space, I was single-mindedly thinking about mutual destruction with you. If you hadn't suddenly mentioned there was another path to choose, I, controlled by despair at that time, would definitely have attacked you. Liquid? What kind of liquid? I don't know. The wishing candle doesn't tell me information about items obtained through wishes. I used it directly without thinking at the time. It did accelerate my fusion with the inverted tree, but also accelerated the pollution on me. Heh, indeed, the wishing candle lives up to its reputation as a cursed object. Are there many cursed objects in this world? Very few. At least I know even many third ranks haven't seen them. So I completely didn't expect that Shea, a first-rank wizard, would have a wishing candle. One of the wishing candle's curse characteristics is that once someone asks about it, you must answer and explain. No wonder when I asked you what that was, you immediately answered me. This characteristic is really, Saul chuckled coldly, designed to incite conflict among people. No wonder Shea had been so nervous before. No matter who possessed this item, once discovered and asked about, they would have to reveal the wishing candle's existence. And he was only first rank. Anyone who came to steal it could beat him. After a moment, Bethstana suddenly realized something. Is my information not very useful to you? Saul shook his head. Not necessarily. I'm very interested in the inverted tree's method of stripping fate lines. It's just that what I need more now is how to connect with other people's fate lines. Saul curled his fingers and knocked on another black page with his knuckles. For example, I currently possess part of someone's soul in her fate lines, but no matter how hard I try, I can't connect her with another part of her spirit body that's far away in another world. How do you want to connect them? Fuse the soul here with the soul there. That would probably require going to another world or having the soul from the other world come here. The barrier between worlds is a problem that troubles fourth-rank wizards. It's not something we can solve now. I don't need complete fusion for now, but at least the two should be able to communicate. If that's the case, it would require at least fourth-rank wizard power. Only they might be able to knock on the world barrier a little and send information out. Saul was thinking, if he had to ask a fourth-rank wizard for help, what price could he currently offer that would move which one? Or rather, which fourth-rank wizard would be safer and wouldn't suddenly sabotage him midway? At this time, Payer, who had been unwilling to speak, suddenly began writing white text. Go find that bastard Ophelia. Saul looked down. Ophelia knew Payer would be sacrificed but still didn't reveal any information. Are you sure she'll help us? Hell that. Miss Payer, please don't use profanity. On the same black page, another type of handwriting appeared. That was Norella's handwriting. Damn it, don't call me Payer. I'm not that stupid woman. Saul knocked on the page again. Continue. Although Ophelia didn't think highly of the Stargate project, she's also very interested in the outside world. This woman puts profit first. For her goals, she can throw away her dignity. If you just reveal a little information about the outside world to her, she'll definitely help you actively. Very good, Saul nodded with satisfaction. This way, Ophelia was indeed a good person to ask for help. Powerful and intelligent, clear-headed and ruthless. Such a wizard was very suitable to become the second target of the Symphony of Fate. As for how to bring her into the pentagram of fate lines, that would require Saul to plan carefully. Chapter 748, Bullying Little Algae. The inverted tree, which had once killed many people, was completely sealed away. The roots of the inverted tree inside Baton Academy had already transformed the parts exposed above ground into a giant hemisphere, completely sealed off from the outside world. The people of Kaugus didn't touch the inverted tree. They had already accepted that the inverted tree was Saul's property. Even though he had left this place, they wouldn't touch it, and even forbade others from approaching it. This also conveniently allowed Shea to rest and recover properly. On the evening of the second day, after Saul left Kaugust, another survivor actually emerged from the inner city that had been quiet all day. Wilder had thick bandages wrapped around his head, his graying beard had turned black, and he looked much more energetic. He hadn't actually been killed by Bethstana, but had his soul absorbed by her, and was used to intercept Shea in the tree heart space. Although the interception failed, he had unexpectedly been cured of the hidden injuries left by the half-elf due to the elf spring water Shea had produced. Wilder had originally been unable to continue studying magic due to his injuries, and could only seek other ways to push open the inner doors, trying to advance to third rank to expel the half-elf's pollution. He hadn't expected to accidentally resolve the hidden problem in his body. This way, the door-opening method Bate had promised became less important. Moreover, he felt Bate's condition wasn't good either, so he secretly left the tree heart space while the two were entangled. Shadu, stationed in the outer city, sensed Wilder's magical fluctuations and flew directly to him. "You're actually still alive. After not coming out for so long, I thought you'd already become nourishment for the inverted tree," Shadu said with a smile, showing no trace of worry on his face. Wilder didn't mind the other's mockery, just asked unexpectedly, "Why are you here? Doesn't the tribunal always ignore Baton Academy's affairs?" Yura sent word that Saul was heading to Kaugust, likely targeting the inverted tree. Since Bethstana was already at the end of her life anyway, she had us come curry favor with Saul. Yura, Wilder was even more confused. Wasn't Yura taken away by Gorsa, or did she escape again to be your inside agent? Heh, you've been hiding from Gorsa too long. Don't you know that Yura has already been completely resurrected by Gorsa, then discarded like trash? Wilder held his forehead. The hole in his head still wasn't completely healed. Indeed, still abandoned in the end. Actually, I suspect she wasn't Yura at all. The real Yura had already died completely after the soul experiments back then. That soul might just be some poor wretch Gorsa found to complete his resurrection experiment. Shadu waved his hand. "We don't know the truth from back then, but that's not important anymore. What's important is that the current Yura can do more things for us." Wilder nodded. "I believe the current Yura must hate Gorsa thoroughly. That's good too. That guy is seeking his own death, which makes it convenient for us to complete the chief's orders." Shadu's expression turned slightly cold. Now the Glare family is protecting Gorsa, waiting for him to advance to fourth rank so they can maintain their family's status after their fourth-rank wizard's decline. But you and I both know that once that madman Gorsa advances to fourth rank, he'll definitely flip the table. Then the stable situation the chief has worked to maintain for over 100 years will be destroyed. Wilder nodded and continued showing loyalty. The two had reached surface agreement, but what they truly thought in their hearts was unknown. "Then let's go to Sky City first." Saul leaned back against his chair and made his decision. Then he closed the diary and looked at his right palm. The muscle texture of his palm slowly moved, squeezing out a brown tree seed the size of a sunflower seed from within. This tree seed looked completely ordinary. If not for the vigorous life force emanating from it, it would be impossible to imagine it had the potential to grow into a towering tree capable of devouring a giant city. However, having ended up in Saul's hands, this tree seed had basically lost its chance to grow into a towering tree. Saul stood up, and the diary on the desk suddenly disappeared. Saul walked quickly downstairs and discovered there were several more people in the wizard tower along the way. These people would show somewhat fearful expressions when they saw Saul, making way for an extremely wide path. Saul continued downward, passed through the black mist corridor, and finally reached the second basement level. Here there was still only little algae and a small sapling suspended in the air. Because Saul wasn't there, no one dared to bother little algae. When it first sensed light, its first reaction was to attack. Saul wasn't polite either. After all, he wasn't afraid of competing over who had more tentacles. Black vines and gray semi-transparent tentacles entangled together, but soon the vines were defeated, pressed firmly to the ground one by the tentacles. Like a girl subdued by a strong man. Only after little algae finally quieted down did Saul free one hand to slowly insert the inverted tree seed into little algae's core root system. The moment the seed was activated, it immediately began sprouting and growing fine, dense brown rootlets as thin as hair. Little algae seemed startled and actually froze in place without moving. But Saul wouldn't allow the inverted tree seed to steal nutrients belonging to little algae. He immediately applied a layer of sealing to it and severed most of its rootlets. After setting up 3 more growth-restricting seals, Saul slowly released little algae. Little algae was somewhat dazed but finally recognized that the person was Saul, collapsing in place without moving. It looked inexplicably somewhat aggrieved. Saul gently patted little algae's tentacle. After this seed grows up, it will help you absorb the pollution in your body. That's the stuff that makes you uncomfortable and want to hit people. Little algae carefully extended a tentacle, opening its shark-like mouth, but this time it didn't attack Saul. Abay. Knowing this was little algae telling him not to worry, Saul sighed softly. The inverted tree can absorb pollution, but it will definitely compete with you for food too. Remember to share some with it. I'll give you extra meals. Seeing little algae obediently nod, Saul also showed a smile. At this time, he noticed the diary stirring again, so he took it out to check. It turned out Bethstana was speaking inside. Wizard Saul, if you took the inverted tree's seed to save the soul-devouring mire before you, I can only say you chose the wrong method. How so? Bethstana understood the inverted tree very well, and Saul valued her suggestions highly. Although the inverted tree is powerful and can absorb pollution and chaos from within organisms, its autonomous consciousness is excessive. Even if you can temporarily suppress the seed's growth, it will gradually become stronger after absorbing the pollution within the soul-devouring mire. Since the soul-devouring mire's rank is originally much lower than the inverted tree's, it will inevitably be devoured in return. Saul admitted Bethstana made sense. I've considered this point too. That's why I placed seals on the seed and will constantly monitor their changes afterward. With all due respect, how much energy do you have to constantly watch them? Just one moment of carelessness, and your little darling will become the inverted tree's puppet. Saul clasped his hands together and lowered his eyes. Then speak directly. What's your suggestion? Black Sea Tree Source. Actually, you have a more suitable choice right beside you for absorbing the pollution within the soul-devouring mire, but you've never noticed it. Chapter 749, Black Sea Tree and Red Sea Tree. Bethstana had originally wanted to keep people in suspense, but under the influence of the dead wizard's diary, she involuntarily revealed the answer first before saying her roundabout words, making it seem like she was mentally confused. Saul naturally knew what Bethstana was frustrated about. The Black Page's function of answering any question was definitely unbearable for a proud third-rank wizard. This was also why Bethstana was eager to break free. Even though within the Black Pages, she didn't need to worry about her soul suffering pollution at all. Saul didn't expose her embarrassment and instead asked, I don't know much about the Black Sea Tree. I've only heard that the tribunal has been investigating it. What's its relationship with the Red Sea Tree planted in Nefret? At this point, Bethstana had already reorganized her emotions. Actually, both the Black Sea Tree and Red Sea Tree are new products obtained after modifying the inverted tree. They were both related to the inverted tree. Because the inverted tree's autonomous consciousness is too strong, only one can survive within a certain range. So when the tribunal learned this back then, they didn't seize the inverted tree. However, to preserve the inverted tree, I voluntarily gave them cuttings to research new species. At that time, the Evernite Empire's royal family in Nefret first developed the Black Sea tree, while the tribunal developed the Red Sea tree. The Black Sea tree is more like the inverted tree, with strong independent consciousness, but it won't resist its master. Moreover, it has very strong abilities to absorb and process pollution. The Red Sea tree better meets the tribunal's requirements. It has almost no autonomous consciousness and can be planted and cultivated at will. Although it can also absorb pollution, its efficiency is lower than the Black Sea tree, and it can't process pollution autonomously. After absorbing to a certain extent, it will concentrate and expel the pollution. These two types of trees clearly have different focuses, but they should be applicable in different scenarios. Saul touched his chin. Then, why was the owner of the Black Sea tree hunted by the tribunal? Justin, who had entrusted the Black Sea tree to Saul's care, was already dead. Saul was concerned the Black Sea tree had other problems. Although he had planted it, he hadn't carefully cultivated it. He had even semi-sealed it here. However, thinking that this tree hadn't shown any mutations even after the black tide erupted, it was indeed worthy of being the Evernite Empire's pride. Because wherever there's a Black Sea tree, Red Sea trees can't grow, and will even involuntarily become nourishment for the Black Sea tree. The tribunal needs large quantities of tree that can absorb pollution from seawater, but Black Sea tree can't be mass reproduced, so they can't meet their needs. I see. They can't meet the needs and would destroy the Red Sea trees they had worked so hard to cultivate. No wonder the tribunal wanted to clear out the Black Sea tree. And the royal family that had worked hard to breed Black Sea tree naturally wasn't willing, so the two sides started fighting. Evernite once tried to resist, but when Chief Frim took action, he wiped out the entire royal family. Only one or two people outside managed to survive. Later, it seems other forces interceded and guaranteed that Black Sea tree wouldn't appear in Nefret, which stopped the pursuit. No wonder Justin could barely live in the borderland in the end. But later, he still seemed to be killed in passing. Saul opened the defenses around the Black Sea tree and took out this Black Sea tree for the first time. Since I've already planted the tree seed before I leave, I'll just transplant the Black Sea tree in and remove the tree seed. Hearing this, little Algie's tentacle tips twitched and it completely collapsed. Leaving the second basement level, Saul prepared to check on Kelly. The borderland was full of dangers everywhere, with omnipresent black tide pollution. For Kelly to adapt here would probably take some time. However, when Saul went to find Kelly, he discovered she was no longer in her room. Where is she? Saul walked out of Kelly's room. Miss Kelly is currently on the 3rd floor discussing matters with Lord Byron. Hope appeared timely at the 5th floor stairway. Tower Master, do you need me to invite Miss Kelly over? No need, I'll go myself. Saul waved his hand. The magic notes Kelly had been reading recently were recorded jointly by Saul and Byron. Since Saul wasn't there just now, Kelly must have gone to find Byron for discussion. He walked down the stairs. Although teleportation was more convenient, he usually preferred to move using his own limbs. Hope silently followed behind Saul. When they reached the turn, he suddenly asked quietly, "Tower Master, how should we address Miss Kelly?" Saul stopped and turned back in confusion. Addressing her like this is fine. He didn't understand why Hope was asking this. After thinking, he said, "Of course, you can also ask her how she prefers to be addressed." Hope smiled with pursed lips and nodded, "I understand, sir." He felt the steward's smile contained deeper meaning. But Saul was currently thinking about what else needed to be arranged before going to Sky City again, and didn't think deeply about the steward's words. Reaching the third floor, Saul turned left while the steward bowed to his back before continuing downstairs. Knocking on the door, no one inside responded. Saul pushed the door open and saw Kelly completely focused on staring at a container undergoing a reaction. Byron was on the other side of the room, processing some materials. "What are you looking at?" Saul approached. "I looked at your inertization formula and asked Senior Byron to demonstrate the entire process for me." On the metal instrument, densely packed silver needles were inserted, with a magic crystal floating above each needle. Beneath the metal disc, a bit of black tissue was sealed. As time passed, the magic crystals on the silver needles gradually turned black, while the black tissue below gradually became gray and semi-transparent. Byron now approached and used tweezers to remove the blackened magic crystals. This method can relatively thoroughly remove pollution from the body. However, Saul and I discussed that if faced with black tide eruptions like seawater, our method is too slow. We probably wouldn't have time to clear the pollution before being overwhelmed. Kelly nodded. "I understand. The drainage speed can't match the water injection speed. The people in the pool will eventually drown." Having watched just once, she had memorized the entire process and even proposed her own ideas. "I noticed that during this experiment, the silver needles don't completely eliminate the pollutants. What does this energy transfer rely on?" "It's a type of radiation very similar to how pollution spreads, or you could say it's a type of wave." Saul leaned against the experiment table and told Kelly his hypothesis. "Radiation," Kelly bit her lip. "I've also researched radiation." Byron put away the instrument and directly threw the tissue that had become gray and semi-transparent to Saul. Saul caught it with his hand, and the tissue melted into his palm and disappeared. "What was that?" Kelly screamed and grabbed Saul's palm. "Are you doing human experiments?" "Ha ha ha!" Saul burst into laughter. Byron shrugged. "Kelly, if you need to, you can have Saul lie on the experiment table anytime." Chapter 750, Visiting the Chaos Realm. Seeing Kelly's very interested expression regarding black tide pollution, combined with the energy Byron had invested in this area, Saul made a decision. Black tide pollution is a potential danger lurking beneath all our feet. Although I can now treat some people affected by pollution, if the black tide erupts on a large scale, even I would have difficulty escaping death. That's why Senior Byron and I have never given up on inertization experiments. Kelly looked up from the numerous books. After learning about the Borderlands history, she couldn't help but feel worried. "My metal radiation also has some similarities with black tide radiation. I'll bring over all my insights and notes from these years. But can we really find a method to handle black tide on a large scale? Didn't you speculate that the black tide might come from some higher-order existence? Might we be unable to resist from a power-level perspective? Just like how wizard apprentices could never be opponents of true wizards. Regarding the black tide source, that abyssal eye might be a method from higher-rank wizards, but the black tide isn't completely unresistible. In fact, I know of a place where black tide pollution once erupted, but in the end, all the black tide was completely inertized into black powder, mixed into the earth. The even more terrifying anchor points there became white bone beasts sleeping underground, and they also lost their ability to pollute us." Byron looked thoughtful. Kelly stood up in amazement. "What place? Can I go see it?" Saul took out his Chaos Realm compass accordingly. "That's an unnamed world side. My exploration of it is still limited. I currently just call it the Chaos Realm. As for what that place actually is, I'll take you both to see directly." Seeing that both Kelly and Byron were ready, Saul directly activated the compass. After a bout of dizziness, Saul landed on the ground. Byron beside him was fine. His spiritual body was powerful, and although he staggered after arriving, he quickly steadied himself. As for Kelly, she sat down hard on the ground. Looking sideways at the two men beside her, Kelly silently complained. Two freaks. Only after the dizziness from world traversal disappeared did Kelly grab Saul's clothes corner and stand up. While patting the dust off her bottom, she heard Saul say, "The dust you're patting contains small amounts of black powder." Huh? Kelly quickly stopped patting and examined her palms. Byron also immediately crouched down, staring at the soil beneath his feet. Knowing the two had started their research, Saul didn't disturb them and first walked to Noah's residence nearby. Scanning with mental power, the place was empty. He found a letter written in common language in the room. This letter was placed on a small box that looked like jade. Saul opened the letter. As expected, this letter was left by his little apprentice Noah. The letter explained that Noah, using Saul's name, had led Scorpion's Boulder tribe to absorb the few nearby tribes. The newly merged tribe was renamed the Black Tide tribe. Noah had used the magical tools Saul gave him to help create many implements. These tools were all used for the Black Tide tribe's infrastructure, and people's lives gradually improved. Once survival became easier, people had extra energy for other things. Noah commanded these idle people to specifically enter the Black Death Desert to dig sand, while Noah would sift out the black powder inside and collect it to give to Saul. The jade box below the letter contained the black powder Noah had collected during this period. Noah also mentioned the white bone monsters in the letter. It was said that people here had long had legends about white bone monsters, but they had never seen them with their own eyes. When Saul appeared before everyone riding a white bone monster that day, these people, without Noah's prompting, had already determined that Saul was a god. But Noah insisted they call Saul Death Judge to avoid causing Saul trouble later. Death Judge, Saul's mouth twitched. That sounds awful. Regarding Noah's actions, Saul didn't interfere too much. He rarely came here, and his understanding of this place was already less than Noah's. Moreover, it would be difficult for a wizard apprentice leading a group of ordinary people in a world with almost no magical power to cause any major trouble. However, he could have them pay attention to collecting information about white bone monsters. Saul currently had captured one and was studying it, but if he could get another one, he wouldn't mind having more. Saul left a message for Noah and again left him some magic crystals. Then he walked out of Noah's house and saw that Byron and Kelly had actually dug a large hole in the ground outside the house. He walked to the edge of the large hole, looking at Kelly crouching at the bottom. "No need to rush. I'll leave this Chaos Realm compass for you both. You and Byron can take turns using it, but you can only come here once per month." "Why?" Kelly suddenly looked up. "Is it because this place lacks magical power?" Byron had already discovered this world's biggest problem. Saul nodded. A world lacking magical power is also a challenge for our bodies that are accustomed to magical power. When our strength isn't sufficient, staying here for long periods would also have many negative effects on us. Saul took out the compass and threw it to Byron. "This compass has a one-day cooldown. Each time you come here, it's best to return as soon as the cooldown period arrives. This will have the least impact on your bodies." Right after Saul finished speaking, Byron actually jumped to the bottom of the hole like Kelly. Saul was astonished. "You?" Byron's voice came from the bottom of the hole. "Time is precious." Saul didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "No, if you want to collect black powder, I have a ready-made box here. We're observing the soil quality and stratification here." This time Kelly responded. "All right." Saul stood up, crossing his arms. "I'm going to check on the bone lizard." He left the two research fanatics behind and went underground to examine the white bone monster he had sealed. Perhaps because Saul had hidden the anchor point on his body well this time. When he reached the underground sealing point, the white bone monster inside had no reaction at all, as if it were asleep. Saul took another small section of bone from it, then resealed and reinforced this place. Throughout the entire process, the white bone monster showed no reaction whatsoever. A day later, Saul brought back the dust-covered Byron and Kelly. The three of them stayed in the laboratory for another 3 days before coming out. After that, Saul finally had time to listen to Stewart Hope's report on the Wizard Tower's new situation and meet several newly joined wizards and wizard apprentices. These people were meeting Saul for the first time. Each one was silent, as if intimidated, trembling nervously. Saul even discovered that one apprentice hadn't breathed the entire time. He wondered if the person would faint from oxygen deprivation after going out. After meeting these people and listening to the steward's report on recent situations, Saul nodded with satisfaction. He didn't have time to manage these trivial matters and could only leave everything to the steward. Fortunately, the steward was already accustomed to these affairs. However, at the end, when Saul asked the steward if he needed him to do anything, Hope hesitated for a moment before saying, "Tower Master, currently our wizard tower's area and height are limited. These new people are all living in the mushroom forest outside. However, some matters require their handling, which is still quite inconvenient. Do you think we could expand the Purity Wizard Tower?" Indeed, Saul sighed somewhat. When this wizard tower was built, he only had a group of spirit bodies around him, not even one living person. He hadn't expected that in just 2 years, a city had already been established beside the wizard tower. He raised his hand to caress the wall beside him. "I'll communicate with them tonight." Chapter 751, The Cat's Gratitude. Of course, Saul had only changed the tower's overall structure. The interior decoration still needed to trouble the steward. At the same time, Saul also stipulated that 7 floors, the second basement level and floors 13 through 17, were off-limits to others. If any reckless person wanted to trespass, the numerous wraith fragments within the wizard tower would educate them properly. If they were internal tower personnel, they still had a chance to live as long as they immediately withdrew. But if outsiders trespassed into the wizard tower, Saul wouldn't give them a chance to leave alive. Steward Hope had initially worried the wizard tower was too small. Now he worried it was too big, and finally decided to recruit a batch of servants from Rhine City to handle cleaning. So after Saul left, the Purity Wizard Tower took on more resemblance to Gorse's Wizard Tower. This time Saul didn't bring Kelly or Byron when he left. Those two had already thrown themselves completely into researching the Chaos Realm. But he did bring along an orange cat. August scorching sun. Even the sea breeze blowing from the ocean seemed charred, heavy and humid, mixed with a strange fishy smell. Saul carried a huge leather suitcase, with an orange cat crouching by his feet, following behind a group of ordinary people, waiting in line to board an airship. This new master of the borderland was once again skipping work to travel abroad. Although he wasn't afraid of being investigated, he should still keep a low profile when traveling. Combined with Saul's personal mischievous taste, he didn't even maintain his wizard identity, directly disguising himself as a merchant and preparing to take an airship to Sky City, where 4th-rank wizard Ophelia resided. As the name suggested, Sky City was suspended in the sky. So traveling there, people generally chose airships. Even powerful wizards were unwilling to waste their precious magical power on the journey. 4th-rank wizards were an exception. The crowd moved forward a few more meters. Everyone boarding the airship had their luggage strictly inspected to prevent carrying dangerous items aboard. After all, it was an airship. If something went wrong, it could very likely result in no survivors. You young people are so lucky, not sweating even in such hot weather. When the forward movement stopped again, the person behind Saul suddenly struck up a conversation with him. Saul set down his large suitcase beside his feet, and the orange cat meowed and flicked its tail. Saul turned around and saw a man who wasn't very fat but was already covered in sweat. In such hot weather, the other party was still wearing a shirt and formal suit. It would be strange if he wasn't sweating. Although Saul was also wearing long sleeves and pants, his clothes were all made of breathable linen. Unfortunately, the clothing he thought would blend in with ordinary people was quite out of place here. 8 or 9 out of 10 people waiting to board were wearing formal attire. The rest were either servants of these people or wore similar uniform-style clothing. Few people dressed as casually and leisurely as Saul. Not bad, maybe I'm just naturally not prone to sweating. Saul replied briefly and prepared to turn around. But the man standing behind him in line turned out to be quite a chatterbox. That's even more enviable. Not sweating much means not having to change and wash clothes often. Think of how much time that saves. His gaze swept over Saul's hands and the large suitcase by his feet. Then he actively asked, "Young man, this is your first time on an airship, isn't it?" Saul smiled shyly. "To tell you the truth, yes, this is my first time waiting in line here." "Don't be nervous. Actually, airships aren't much. As long as you don't go to the deck edge and look down, it's no different from riding a boat." The man first comforted Saul, then introduced himself. "By the way, I'm Mike. I'm going to Sky City to visit relatives this time. What about you, young man?" "I'm Saul. This time I'm going to Sky City partly to see the world, and partly to see if there are any opportunities to make a living." "Job hunting?" Mike seemed somewhat surprised. He looked Saul up and down again, this time without hiding his scrutiny. Sky City isn't just any ordinary place. Although it's also called the paradise of knowledge, I've heard from my relatives that only high-rank wizards can live comfortably there. Many wizard apprentices and even some low-rank wizards have quite difficult lives. "Really?" Saul was very surprised. He recalled Merchant Jayaji Agu's descriptions. "But I heard from a friend that in Sky City, even ordinary people have the right to pursue knowledge." "Hiss, Saul, you wouldn't happen to be a scholar, would you?" Mike's face became tense. "Do you have scholar qualifications certified by any wizard faction?" Scholar qualifications. Saul had never heard this term before, but felt it should have some recognition among ordinary people. So Saul just honestly shook his head. The muscles on Mike's face immediately relaxed. "Hey, did you think the ordinary people in the rumors were really ordinary people? Only those who obtain scholar qualifications certified by wizard factions can enter the Academy of Knowledge to study and work." Then he changed the subject. "However, you're young and seem to have good physical condition. So you still have a chance to enter the Academy of Practice to do some auxiliary work. But jobs there are quite hard to get. Even if ordinary people meet all the conditions, they might need extraordinary luck to get a position. The competition really is fierce." Saul nodded but wasn't intimidated. A picture of a fearless newborn calf. Seeing Saul didn't respond further, Mike moved closer and lowered his voice. "Saul, I think you look trustworthy and are an honest young man. I can't bear to let you return empty-handed. I'll point you to a path that, while I can't guarantee it will get you into the Academy of Practice, will definitely increase your chances by 50%. Saul found it amusing to see the other party being so careful that others wouldn't overhear, speaking secretively. But he still maintained his naive persona, asking in surprise, "What kind of path?" Then he heard Mike lower his voice again, leaning his head over. "Have you heard of the cat's gratitude?" "Saul." "Orange cat, meow." Saul was waiting for more, but Mike actually stopped talking. "SHH, this isn't the place to talk. After we board the airship, I'll give you my room number. If you want to give yourself another option, come find me after dinner. If you have other concerns, it's fine not to come." After speaking, Mike retreated again. Even when Saul pressed him asking, "What exactly is the cat's gratitude?" the other party refused to continue. Seeing the other party being mysterious and refusing to explain, Saul didn't think of using force. Instead, like an ordinary young person, when he couldn't get further explanation from the other party, he began considering whether to go or not. At this time, the orange cat Kate carefully transmitted a secret message. "Lord Saul, this cat's gratitude. It wouldn't be a curse you spread, would it?" Chapter 752, Lucky Legend. This was truly his first time queuing to board an airship. Previously, with Gorsa's allocation, airships would specially detour to pick him up. From the Wizard Tower to the airship VIP cabin, it was a one-step process. This time, Saul wasn't in a hurry. He had brought a suitcase full of books and notes, planning to study hard on the airship and thoroughly supplement his lacking foundational knowledge. The luggage inspection before boarding the airship was very thorough. Even suitcases had to be opened and checked item by item. Saul took advantage of opening his suitcase to stuff in 2 sets of clean clothes. Otherwise, it would seem very strange for an ordinary person who didn't look wealthy to live on an airship for a month, with only a suitcase of books and writing materials. After passing the inspection, the woman responsible for checking him showed a genuine smile. "You're a scholar, aren't you? I'll try my best to arrange a quiet room for you. Would you be willing to stay at the end of the corridor? It would be more peaceful there." "That's really very kind of you," Saul nodded repeatedly. Finally boarding the deck, Saul found a spot not far from the entrance to stand. This airship generally had no wizards aboard, making its ticket price the cheapest among nearby airships. Having wizards on an airship was actually a form of safety guarantee. As long as they didn't encounter wizard battles, even if the airship really had problems, someone could provide immediate remedy. The official powers of the 3 continents had all emphasized that wizards could not destroy operating airships. This also provided institutional protection for passenger safety. Saul saw Mike, who had just spoken with him, also board the airship. "This is my room number. I'll be there after dinner. If you also hope to receive luck's favor, remember to come. I can treat you to some wine." Saul nodded with a smile. He wasn't deliberately waiting for Mike here. Rather, he had sensed magical power fluctuations on the deck. The fluctuations were very small, feeling like they should be from a wizard apprentice. But Saul didn't sense any wizard apprentices among the passengers. Seeing Saul, dressed simply, standing near the deck railing for a long time, a ship's attendant approached somewhat warily. "Oh, I'm fine, just looking at the scenery." Saul waved his hand, indicating he wouldn't jump from here. The attendant still followed Saul. "Then let me escort you back to your room. After all, passengers can't stay on deck when the airship takes off." Saul nodded, kicked the orange cat by his feet, picked up his large leather suitcase and walked toward the cabin. After taking 2 steps, he turned back to the attendant still following him. "Excuse me, are there any wizard lords on this airship?" "No wizard lords. However, there is a wizard apprentice lord traveling with the ship, but he rarely meets outsiders." Saul nodded. It seemed the weak magical fluctuations he had just sensed came from this traveling wizard apprentice. After dinner, Saul was still reading in his room. The orange cat Kate beside him was wearing a napkin like a human, holding a knife and fork, eating the steak and vegetable soup that Saul hadn't touched. "Lord Saul, do you plan to go hear what that Mike person says about the cat's gratitude?" Kate asked seemingly casually. Saul's gaze remained on the book pages in his hands. "What, Do you want to learn how to show gratitude too? Kate was currently equivalent to Saul's captive. At first, he had always thought about escaping, but after discovering that Saul was the new master of the borderland, he obediently stayed by Saul's side. As a wizard transformed into a cat, he desperately needed a powerful backer like Saul who could also treat mental pollution. Saul was also curious about Kate's condition, so he had always kept him nearby for research. The book he was currently reading was also research related to soul transfer. He wanted to try whether he could transfer Kate's soul into a human body without borrowing the diary's power. Looking at the book in Saul's hands, Kate always felt a chill down his spine. He shifted his bottom, his tail unconsciously swishing behind him. I am somewhat curious, since you also mentioned this term before. I think it must be something significant. Saul pressed the book against his chin, wondering whether to tell Kate that the cat's gratitude was actually just a joke he had made. After a moment, Saul explained nothing and placed the book on the table. All right, then I'll go see. Perhaps I can find something interesting from an ordinary person. Upon hearing this, Kate's face showed a smile. A crimson long tongue suddenly extended from the small cat's mouth, reaching a meter long. With a sweep and roll across the dining table, it cleaned up all the food. Then the orange cat jumped down, walked on two legs to Saul's front. I'm finished eating, Lord Saul. Let me accompany you. Saul looked down at Kate still wearing the napkin. You can follow. But what I'm bringing is a cat, not. Kate understood immediately. He lowered his head, stepped on his front paw, and tore off the napkin around his neck. Then he got on all fours, looked up and meowed once. Saul smiled with satisfaction and pushed the door open. The orange cat followed lightly behind him. The two went up a flight of stairs and found Mike's room in the middle of this floor. Knock, knock, knock. Saul gently knocked on the door. After a while, steady footsteps approached, and Mike opened the door from inside. Seeing Saul, his face broke into a smile. So eager to come, I haven't finished dinner yet. He still had a napkin hanging around his neck, matching the orange cat's earlier appearance, as if Saul's arrival had just interrupted his meal. Saul said nothing, his gaze moving past Mike to look at the dinner on his table that was no longer warm. Cough, cough, since you're here, come in. I actually don't eat much at night. Mike coughed lightly and quickly stepped aside. Only then did Saul enter. The orange cat also slipped through the door gap just as it closed. Mike put down his knife and fork, tore off the loose napkin around his neck, peered into the corridor to see no one was there, then closed the door. Looking quite mysterious. Saul, honestly, I'm giving you a chance to become lucky because I see you're young and venturing out alone, which isn't easy. Otherwise, this bit of luck wouldn't even be enough for me alone. What exactly is it? Why can luck be shared with others? And what is this cat's gratitude you mentioned? Mike smiled mysteriously, his head also swaying. I know that 90% of you coming here is disbelief, and 10% is trying your luck. He walked to the bed and pulled out a palm-sized package, wrapped tightly in cloth from under layers of bedding. But it doesn't matter if you don't believe. I can make you believe right now. This is a world with magical power. It's not surprising that miraculous items appear in this world. Mike spoke while unwrapping his tightly wrapped package. After layer upon layer of unsealing, a white ceramic kitten appeared before Saul and Kate. This ceramic kitten was crudely made, entirely white, with only its eyes painted red with rough pigment. Matching its ordinary appearance, Saul detected not a trace of magical or mental power fluctuation from it. Yet Mike was still proudly introducing his treasure. This is the cat's gratitude. Possessing it, you'll become incredibly lucky, and whatever your heart desires can be achieved. Meow. Kate almost couldn't hold back his complaints. Chapter 753. I will surely beat you 3 times. The only thing noteworthy about the white porcelain cat sculpture in his hands was probably just its overall outline. It seemed to have a somewhat aloof and divine posture. Haha, Saul, looking at your expression, I know you're somewhat disappointed with it, right? Mike smiled mysteriously, seemingly unsurprised by Saul's reaction. He extended his index finger and waved it twice in front of Saul. This is the first piece of advice from an elder who has been traveling and trading for over 10 years. Never be deceived by the surface appearance of things. He placed the white porcelain kitten on the dining table and gently stroked the kitten's head with his hand. I'll demonstrate it for you personally now. Mike took out a regular 12-sided die. You know dice, right? Let's throw randomly and compare sizes. I just petted the cat god and received a brief blessing. In the next 3 rounds, I will definitely beat you. After speaking, Mike extended his hand towards Saul, indicating he should go first. Saul picked up the die thinking, could Mike be a cheater or a highly skilled gambler? He didn't control his strength and casually threw the die into the plate Mike had prepared. The number facing up on the die was 10. This was already quite a large number. Mike smiled confidently, picked up the die, and also threw it very casually. The die collided with the plate, making a crisp sound. When the die stopped again, the number on top was 11. Exactly 1 point more than Saul's. Saul said nothing and picked up the die to throw a second time. This time it was 6 points. Mike also threw very casually. The die drew an arc in the air, and when it stopped, it was 8 points. Mike looked up at Saul. I've already beaten you 2 rounds. Saul crossed his arms, then extended one finger to point at the die in the plate. This time you go first. Mike raised his eyebrows and smiled slyly, as if saying, I already know what you're thinking. However, he didn't decline and still picked up the die, throwing it casually. This time he threw 11 points. Quite large, but not the peak number. Saul reached out to pick up the die. He felt the texture of the die with his fingers and didn't discover any layered materials inside. So it seemed the other party's die-throwing technique was very skillful. But Saul wasn't afraid either. With his muscle control, he could throw whatever number he wanted. He flicked his middle finger lightly, and the die flew out with a ding sound, landing in the plate and starting to spin. When the rotation was about to stop, both could see that the top of the die showed 12 points. However, just as the die was about to stop, the entire airship suddenly shuddered and dropped about half a meter downward in an instant. Don't worry, sometimes air currents or flying birds can cause the airship to shake. Nothing will happen. Mike remained calm and didn't even look at the die in the plate. Saul shifted his gaze from Mike's composed face to the plate on the table. Due to the recent shaking, the die in the plate instantly changed from the about to stop 12 points to 9 points. Saul looked at Mike again. The other party hadn't moved improperly from beginning to end. Finally, he looked at the white porcelain kitten sitting quietly on the table. Luck is just like this, unclear and indescribable, but it truly exists. Mike leaned back and smiled even more proudly. People used to say luck favors those who are prepared, but some people prepare their whole lives without luck ever favoring them once. He leaned forward again, elbows on the table, fingers interlaced against his chin. And today, you've gained a chance to directly purchase luck. How much? Saul asked directly. The corner of Mike's mouth, hidden behind his fingers, curled up. From Saul's last die throw, he could tell this young man had some ability. But the more capable someone was, the more easily they fell into another extreme after failing at something they were confident about. They would inexplicably believe in whatever had defeated their skills, even if that opportunity seemed incredibly absurd. Since you're so straightforward, I won't beat around the bush either. 20,000 silver coins or 20 magic crystals. Saul raised his eyebrows. You also accept magic crystals? Of course. We're all people going to Sky City to make a living. Don't tell me you didn't prepare magic crystals. I do have some, but I need to think about it. This money is too much. Of course you can. Mike nodded first, but then reminded Saul. However, Saul, good luck won't always stay in place waiting for you. If you can't make up your mind before the airship reaches Sky City, I can only abandon this transaction. After Saul returned to his room, Kate, who had been holding back the entire way, finally couldn't help but speak. I think this person is just an experienced swindler. That white porcelain kitten is both ugly and has no magical fluctuations at all, yet he wants to cheat you out of 20 magic crystals. If we were really just ordinary people, 20 magic crystals would basically be a lifetime savings. But he did beat me 3 times. Saul looked thoughtful, and the last accident wasn't something an ordinary person could arrange. Lord Saul, I can tell you don't often deal with this type of person. Kate licked his cat paw. People like Mike, even if they didn't encounter the airship shaking, would definitely have other ways to interfere with your die. Did you notice the time limit he gave you for consideration? Why before the airship reaches port? Because once you complete the transaction, he'll immediately leave the airship and make sure you can never find him again. Of course, this is only based on the premise that you're just an ordinary person. That makes some sense, Saul nodded. So I plan to go look at that ceramic kitten again tonight. Tonight, Kate blurted out. How will you go look? Saul drew a wavy line in the air with his hand. Float over. Kate's whiskers trembled. As long as you're happy. That night Saul lay on the narrow bed and completed in soul projection. The orange cat curled up sleeping in the chair seemed to sense something, lifted one eyelid, saw Saul was still on the bed, then closed it again. It was still muttering, I knew he wouldn't go. Saul didn't wake Kate and directly floated upward. He quickly reached the upper floor and, after passing through several walls, finally arrived at Mike's room. During the day when the airship shook, he had vaguely sensed a mental power. But that mental power was very special, a type of mental fluctuation he had never seen before. Fast and weak. Like down floating in willow catkins, making it impossible to distinguish it from the wind. Saul decided to enter the soul state, which was more sensitive to spiritual bodies, and go examine that white porcelain kitten again. He believed that in this state, as long as the white porcelain kitten produced even the slightest fluctuation, he could sense it. However, when Saul passed through the last wall and entered Mike's room, he fell silent. Because Mike was already dead. He sat in the chair, bent over with his face down, drowned in less than 3 centimeters of washing water in a basin. At his feet, the white porcelain kitten that Mike had carefully guarded during the day had fallen to the ground, broken in half. Chapter 754, Interrogation. Hearing Saul's description upon his return, Kate stuck out his tongue in surprise and licked around the corner of her mouth. Drowned in a basin, really, there are all kinds of ways to die. Saul was still leaning against the single bed, still holding the book he had been reading before leaving. But he wasn't reading. Instead, he was looking at the empty air in front of him with a puzzled expression. He seemed to be explaining to Kate, while also organizing his own thoughts. I examined the white porcelain kitten. There was no magical power inside or outside. The overall construction materials were just the most ordinary clay and the most ordinary pigments, not magical materials either. Then it could also be murder, Kate said. This person was swindling people everywhere. He probably made quite a few enemies. Saul lightly tapped his chin with the book's spine. I checked his luggage and found large denomination notes hidden inside. But his luggage hadn't been touched by anyone, so it shouldn't be for money or revenge for being swindled. Kate originally didn't care about some swindler's life or death at all. but he suddenly noticed that Saul was investigating very seriously. He seemed very concerned about the swindler's cause of death. This made Kate sit up and prick his ears to listen to Saul speak. I also examined his soul, wanting to understand his cause of death by exploring his consciousness. Saul stopped tapping his chin with the book's spine, but his soul was gone. Meow. His soul disappeared very thoroughly, cleanly, like a bowl you've licked clean. As long as you're happy. Saul chuckled softly, lay down on the bed, and covered his face with the book, actually looking like he was going to sleep. In any case, this journey probably won't be boring. Seeing Saul lie down, Kate also curled up on the chair again and closed his eyes. In any case, as long as you're happy. A third-rank boss on an airship. Even if something unexpected happened, to him it would be like watching a drama. What did he, a cat, have to worry about? The next morning, Kate understood why Saul said this journey wouldn't be boring. Because their room door was violently pounded early in the morning. Mr. Saul, are you in there? Saul slowly opened his eyes. He had only slept for 1 hour last night, spending the rest of the time meditating. The reason he hadn't gotten up yet was that a normal person should be very drowsy at this time and wouldn't immediately wake up to answer the door. Kate had been awake for a while too. He ignored the increasingly loud knocking and stretched like a cat, then turned to look at the scenery outside the small round window. Just when Saul thought the timing was about right and he should go over, the room door was suddenly opened silently. At the same time, a weak magical fluctuation spread in through the keyhole. Door opening quite skilled. Saul sat up, the book on his face falling to his legs. Is there something wrong? He looked expressionless, appearing as if he hadn't woken up properly. Why did you open my door without my permission? His gaze swept over the 3 or 4 people outside the door, finally settling on the middle-aged man standing against the left door frame. That man should be a wizard apprentice. Judging by his mental power fluctuations, he had reached 3rd level and no longer needed to worry about the 30-year-old apprentice mutation problem. The other party had a gloomy face and looked more like someone who had been woken up early in the morning than Saul did. Saul looked puzzled and asked, "Is there something wrong?" The attendant who had once guided Saul spoke first. "Mr. Saul, a guest on the airship has had an accident. We'd like to understand the situation with you." Saul showed appropriate surprise, then pointed at himself with his finger. Me. 5 minutes later, Saul was brought alone to an empty room on the upper floor. The room was very clean, with only a wall full of cabinets, a long table and 2 chairs. Everyone else left, leaving only that gloomy man. He had Saul sit down while he sat across from Saul. "I'm Paul. I'll ask you a few questions. Don't try to lie." The 3rd-level wizard apprentice named Paul placed a candle on the empty table, lightly touched the candle with his fingertip, and it ignited with a hiss. Saul stared fixedly at the candle until Paul also pulled out a chair and sat down, then looked back at Paul. "You're quite bold, but it doesn't matter. As long as you tell the truth, I won't make things difficult for you." Paul leaned back in his chair, looking like he wasn't too concerned about interrogating Saul. "Are you a wizard apprentice, sir?" "You just need to answer my questions," Paul said in a low, firm voice. "What's your relationship with the merchant Mike?" So Mike's death had indeed been discovered by them. Such high efficiency. He had died in his bedroom at night, and they discovered the problem in the morning. Did they check passengers' vital signs every day? I met Mike when we were waiting in line together before boarding the airship and had a few words with him, Saul said truthfully. Did something happen to Mike? Paul still didn't answer Saul's question but asked again. Someone saw you meet in his room again after dinner. If you were just people who talked while waiting in line, why meet again after dinner? Saul immediately shifted his body and sat up straighter. Paul across from him saw Saul's reaction and immediately narrowed his eyes. Saul's gaze wandered for a moment, then he suddenly took a breath. Well, actually, thinking about it now, I find it quite incredible myself. If I tell the truth, I'm afraid you'll think I'm still lying. Paul glanced at the candle and said in a deadpan voice, "You don't need to worry about that. As long as you don't lie, I can guarantee that innocent people won't be implicated." Saul suddenly found it somewhat interesting that this Paul was actually making guarantees to an ordinary person. Was this guarantee just lip service, or was it sincere? All right. Next, Saul told Paul about all his conversations with Mike in the room. Of course, regarding the dice throwing, he only said he was quite good at it, without explaining the specific reasons for his skill. Paul was obviously not interested in Saul's past. He seemed to rely on the candle on the table to confirm that everything Saul said was true. But when he heard that Mike had brought out a white porcelain kitten, his body, which had been leaning against the chair, suddenly sat up straight. White porcelain kitten, he stared intently at Saul. What color were the kitten's eyes? Red. Are you sure? Yes, that white porcelain kitten was entirely white with only red eyes, so I remember it very clearly. Paul seemed somewhat restless. This made Saul even more interested. Sir Wizard, have you also heard of the cat's gratitude? Can that white porcelain kitten really bring people luck? But Paul still didn't answer him, and instead asked Saul one final question. When you left the room, was Mike still alive? Alive? Are you saying he's dead now? But Paul stood up. You can go. Saul opened his mouth, then quickly closed it. All right. He got up and walked out of the room. Outside the door, several attendants who had followed them over were still standing there. They looked very surprised to see Saul come out unharmed, and all looked toward Paul inside the room. Paul made a gesture, and these people finally cleared a path. Saul glanced into the room. The only wizard apprentice inside was frowning deeply, thinking about something. Chapter 755. Stay away from places with water. After leaving the upper floor room, Saul was preparing to return to his cabin. But he saw a little girl at the corner of the staircase. A tiny thing, about 4 or 5 years old, biting her left thumb while looking up at Saul with round eyes. Big brother, are you a bad person? Saul hadn't seen such a small human child in a long time. He crouched down to look at the little girl. I'm not a bad person. Not a bad person, then why did you go into that room? If Big Brother was a bad person, he wouldn't have come out. The little girl's mouth immediately formed a perfect circle, looking as if she had suddenly understood. Saul found it amusing, patted the little girl's head, and stood up to go downstairs. Daddy. Saul froze, then looked down to see that the little girl wasn't calling him, but someone behind him. He turned around and was surprised to see Paul, the wizard apprentice who had just interrogated him, standing expressionlessly in the hallway. The adorable human child ran straight to Paul's side and hugged his knee. Daddy. Wizard apprentice Paul remained standing in place, motionless. It looked as if he wasn't being hugged by a little girl, but rather wrapped by a giant python. But Saul could tell that when Paul faced the little girl, it wasn't fear but a kind of nervousness. Extreme nervousness. Really is a father. Saul tried hard to control himself from showing an amused expression. Ahem, Paul cleared his throat, suddenly covered the little girl's ears, then said to Saul, I'll give you a piece of advice. Don't trust the cat's gratitude. People who encounter it may become lucky at first, but they all end up drowning. Drowning, Saul thought of Mike's death. That man who died in a thin layer of washing water. Paul bent down and carefully, but stiffly picked up the little girl like handling cream, no longer communicating with Saul, and turned to leave. The little girl hugged Paul tightly, resting her chin on Paul's shoulder while blinking her big eyes at Saul. Saul waved at the little girl and silently mouthed, "Goodbye." The little girl didn't respond, just buried her head in Paul's shoulder. "This is the first time I've seen a wizard apprentice with a child." Saul leisurely returned to his room. Merchant Mike's death seemed to be deliberately suppressed. During the rest of the journey, Saul heard no one discussing death, nor did anyone else have accidents. After the airship flew steadily and boringly through the sky for a month, it finally reached Saul's destination, Sky City. "This is Sky City." As they were about to dock with Sky City Skyport, most travelers had packed their luggage and stood in the corridor on the top floor. Although passengers still weren't allowed on deck before docking, the top floor corridor had windows for viewing the scenery. Saul stood here for the first time, looking at the landscape ahead. Two people stood beside him, one of whom seemed to have been to Sky City before and was introducing it to the other. Sky City was originally an island on the sea. Then the city lord cast magic to move it into the sky. The other person cooperatively expressed admiration. "Wow, like a place where gods live." Saul followed their gaze and saw, in a clear blue sky, a small island floating on clouds. The entire island was quite large, with its lower half completely obscured by impenetrable clouds, as if floating on a sea of clouds. The upper half of the island was a city built around a circular volcano. A gray road wound spirally upward, leading directly to a water-blue castle at the highest point. The mountain peak was capped with snow, while the foot was submerged in a sea of flowers. White and pink petals were blown by the wind, swirling into local residents' homes. Even viewing through a window layer, one seemed to smell the floral fragrance. "It does look like a paradise," Saul praised silently, but his gaze fell on the lower half of the island completely shrouded in clouds. The distance was somewhat far, and he couldn't see clearly what was beneath the clouds now. But he knew that lifting an island would definitely require quite powerful magical formations for support and continuous resource consumption. Actually completely unnecessary. Saul shook his head secretly. Expending massive magical power to lift an island, could it really be just for looks? Appreciation aside, Saul didn't approve of such wasteful use of magical power. Unless there were other hidden circumstances. A few minutes later, the airship shuddered gently. Two attendants came to open the door leading to the deck. "Please disembark in an orderly fashion, no crowding." People who could afford airship travel all had some wealth or status, and no one pushed or shoved. Many people were even still in their rooms, planning to wait until most others had left before departing. Saul, like an ordinary person, carefully carried his heavy leather suitcase in one hand and the orange cat in the other, stepping onto the not very wide gangplank and walking off the airship. After following the crowd to the square outside the skyport, he didn't leave immediately but found shade under an awning outside a random shop and waited. "Lord Saul, what are you waiting for?" Kate was placed on the suitcase to facilitate their conversation. There were already quite a few wizard apprentices walking around here, so the weak magical fluctuations from their secret speech wouldn't attract others' attention. "Waiting for a cat." "Meow." Saul's lips didn't move, but his voice reached Orange Cat Kate's ears. After the wizard apprentice on the airship discovered Mike's body, he didn't find the white porcelain kitten. Only after I mentioned it did he become serious. Before that, he might have just treated Mike's death as an ordinary murder. What does this indicate? Kate smacked his lips. It indicates someone took that white porcelain kitten before Paul saw the body. He turned to look at Saul. "You're so interested in that kitten, why didn't you take it back then?" "Because I wanted to observe objectively," Saul smiled. "Look, just like observing that attendant." The attendant who had once guided Saul onto the airship and brought him to Paul for interrogation was now hurriedly coming down from the airship, also carrying a suitcase. Just as Saul was about to follow, someone suddenly approached him. The newcomer was a wizard wearing a water-blue cloak with several flower petals on it. The cloak was inscribed with concealment formations, preventing outsiders from determining the person's strength. But when Saul's mental power swept over, he immediately detected that the other party was a true wizard, a second-rank true wizard. The person raised her head, revealing a beautiful face. "Welcome to Sky City, Lord Saul." Saul touched his face and asked without any pretense, "How did you recognize me?" The female wizard smiled brilliantly. "Your cognitive blur magic is cast very skillfully. Others can't recognize you at all. I only knew you were here under the City Lord's guidance." City Lord Ophelia. She actually pays attention to the skyport. The female wizard who came to meet Saul smiled. "In Sky City, the City Lord is everywhere." Chapter 756. Sky City Whisper Flowers. Saul was invited aboard a small airship by the Sky City Witch. This small airship was obviously much more technologically advanced than large airships. Large airships still relied on balloons for takeoff, with magic mainly serving to guide direction, control speed, and maintain safety. But the small airship Saul was now riding was completely powered by magical energy for takeoff. Sky City could make a huge island float for long periods, let alone a tiny pocket airship. Locals call it a flying carriage. The female wizard had just finished her self-introduction. Her name was Ona, Ophelia's attendant official responsible for internal affairs of Sky City. In Saul's view, she was like Steward Hope. Ahead is Sky City's most beautiful scenery, Flower Sea Street. Ona didn't seem in a hurry to bring Saul before Ophelia, but instead acted like a tour guide, introducing Sky City's layout and scenery to Saul. Saul looked out through the flying carriage window and saw the sea of flowers he had previously observed from the airship. When the wind blew, pink and white petals would spiral and hit the car window, then quickly be blown away by the next breeze. "This is the most numerous plant in the city, whisper flowers. Actually, we mainly cultivate them to reinforce the soil and preserve moisture." Ona really did introduce them like a proper guide. "By the way, from here on, you basically won't see ordinary people. The minimum requirement for working here is second-level apprentice." As if to match the dreamlike beauty of the whisper flowers, the buildings here were also very exquisite. The streets were mostly filled with 2- or 3-story small buildings. Almost every building had magical formations inscribed on their rooftops and walls. There weren't many pedestrians on the streets, and those present walked hurriedly. Many people had flower petals stuck to them. Seemingly due to haste, no one bothered brushing off the petals on their bodies. These passers-by also seemed to blend with the surrounding sea of flowers. To the left front of the flying carriage, a window on the second floor happened to be pushed open. A blonde-haired, pale-faced youth leaned out, seemingly admiring the beautiful scenery outside. Then Saul saw him push out a corpse from inside the window. The corpse's head and limbs were already incomplete, seemingly gnawed by some creature. As it fell from the second-floor window, large amounts of blood splattered on the pink and white walls. Banged! The corpse fell onto the street soil covered with flower petals, splashing up countless broken petals. When the petals fell again, they buried the corpse. Not long after, in the instant the flying carriage sped past, that corpse suddenly disappeared. Only the bloodstains on the wall could prove that everything just witnessed wasn't an illusion. Ona sat beside Saul and also saw the body-dumping scene, but her expression and demeanor showed no change whatsoever, as if what the blonde youth had thrown out wasn't a corpse, but a handful of wildflowers. "All right," Saul chuckled inwardly. "This place is indeed still the wizard world, not a paradise." The flying carriage continued forward. The sea of flowers gradually disappeared, and the exquisite scenic buildings became proper rows of high-rises and small squares with different functions. This is the Academy of Knowledge, and over there is the Academy of Practice. The Academy of Knowledge had no scenery. Most people stayed inside buildings. Occasionally, someone would read in the square, looking very studious and hardworking. But when the flying carriage passed the Academy of Practice, Saul discovered the small squares here were much livelier. Wizards in one small square seemed to be conducting some experiment. The experiment happened to fail, and a wizard apprentice assisting nearby had his upper body blown to pieces. Large amounts of blood mixed with flesh sprayed out. The wizard, who was unharmed, looked at his notes for review, only caring about why the experiment had failed. In less than a few minutes, Saul had witnessed 2 fatal accidents. But whether at the accident sites or in this flying carriage, no one made a big fuss. Only the pink flower petals seemed disturbed, spinning in the wind. Saul opened the car window and reached out to catch a petal. These whisper flower petals aren't dyed with human blood, are they? Ona covered her mouth in surprise, her words carrying some playfulness. Don't joke, human blood stinks terribly. The flying carriage passed through the Academy of Practice and Academy of Knowledge, crossed densely packed residential areas and a ring of flower seas, finally arriving at Sky City's tallest building, a light blue castle that could blend with the sky. Ona smiled with pride in her eyes. That's the white glass palace where the city lord resides. The flying carriage slowly landed on an open-air platform. 3 people stood at the platform's edge, 2 men and 1 woman, discussing something intently and heatedly, seemingly completely unaware of the carriage's landing. The 2 men wore ordinary black wizard robes, while the woman wore a sea blue gown with half her long hair pinned up and the rest draped over her shoulders and chest. Even her skin was glowing. Standing there, she was both prominent and dazzling. After the flying carriage stopped, Ona jumped out first. Saul saw her walk directly over and curtsy to the woman in the blue gown. "City Lord, I've brought Lord Saul here." That woman was actually Ophelia. She wasn't waiting for me here, was she? Saul barely sensed any magical fluctuations from her. Except for her outstanding appearance, she seemed like an ordinary person everywhere else. Hearing Ona's words, Ophelia stopped discussing and turned to look over, nodding slightly at Saul, then said to Ona, "Please have Lord Saul meet me in the main hall." Ona curtsied again, then returned without having Saul go forward to greet Ophelia. Saul was somewhat puzzled, then heard Ona say, "Please follow me to the main hall to meet the city lord." After speaking, Ona walked ahead. Saul followed, took 2 steps, then looked back at Ophelia, who was still standing at the platform edge talking with the 2 male wizards. Maybe she'll go to the main hall after finishing her conversation. Saul turned back to continue following Ona. Looks like I'll have to wait a while. Maybe I can let Peyer and Narella out. Since Ophelia can sense me coming to the island, she should also be able to discover her sister. But Saul had barely walked 10 meters when he encountered Ophelia again. At this moment, this Ophelia in the blue gown was walking and discussing something with another wizard, different from the previous 2 male wizards, holding several snow-white manuscript pages. Her expression was peaceful yet focused. When Ona was less than 3 meters from Ophelia, she curtsied again. "City Lord." This time Ophelia didn't even nod at her, walking past Ona and Saul as if she had seen nothing. Saul's gaze followed Ophelia as she brushed past him, gradually turning his head until he saw her also walk to the platform area. At this moment, 2 identical Ophelias stood left and right on the platform. Yet neither Ona nor the wizards conversing with the 2 Ophelias showed any doubt about this. Is this clone magic? Saul couldn't help asking Ona beside him. "Yes, Lord Saul." Ona smiled and nodded. The city lord always says time is limited but knowledge is infinite. If possible, she hopes to transform into thousands to pursue more knowledge. Saul couldn't help but sigh. Creating clones isn't difficult, and splitting souls is just a bit painful, but splitting souls while also dividing out partially independent consciousness that can think. Lady Ophelia is truly amazing. He suddenly thought of Pear in the diary. Actually, she was also consciousness actively split off by the wind sprite Pear. These two sisters both liked self-division. Chapter 757, How About We Cooperate? Passing through the open-air corridor, climbing several spiral steps, and entering dark archways. Saul followed Ona all the way to the most solemn main hall of the entire castle. Along the way, he saw several more Ophelias. He could only say this woman was indeed much more insane than her sister. When entering the main hall Ona had mentioned, Ona didn't go in, only making a gesture for Saul to enter alone. The great doors opened, revealing an unexpectedly dim room inside. However, with his excellent vision, Saul could easily see the interior. The spacious main hall was carpeted in red velvet, with a huge and ornate chandelier overhead. The walls on both sides also had exquisite bronze-colored candle stands. Only the light from overhead and both sides was rather dim. Below each candle stand sat a round-bottomed, thin-necked white porcelain bottle, but the bottles contained no decorative items. Just bare bottles. These white porcelain bottles lined the path with the candles all the way to the end of the main hall. At the end were 33 steps. On the high platform above the stairs sat a gorgeous throne woven with gold and silver. But strangely, no one sat on the throne. Instead, a white porcelain bottle of the same size and shape was placed in the center. Where a person should sit, a bottle sat instead. Amusing, yet somewhat spine-chilling. The midday sunlight could barely enter this room. Windows on both sides were hidden behind heavy curtains. The main hall was extremely dim. A solemn yet eerie atmosphere crawled like a spider into every corner of the room. Click! When Saul fully entered the main hall, the great doors behind him automatically closed. Yet the room's light and darkness levels showed no obvious change. Now the entire main hall seemed to contain only Saul. After waiting a moment, Saul broke the silence. "Lady Ophelia, are you or one of your clones here?" Splash, splash. The first response to Saul was the sound of water. Then came murmuring laughter. Hee hee. A skull top suddenly rose from the white porcelain thin-necked bottle on the high platform, then continued rising, revealing a compressed and deformed forehead, brow bone, eyes. Until an entire human face squeezed out from the white porcelain bottle, the accumulated flesh began writhing and twisting, gradually transforming into the beautiful face of Ophelia that Saul had seen several times. Only her neck remained frighteningly long, more like an intestine. "Welcome, Wizard Saul." Saul bowed with hand to chest. "Please forgive my uninvited arrival." Ophelia smiled with pursed lips. "How could I blame you? Ever since you single-handedly resolved the Storm Eye eruption without harming anyone, I've always wanted to invite you to Sky City as a guest. I just worried that the Borderland couldn't do without you, so I didn't presume to invite you." Saul was silent for a moment, then said, "The Borderland won't have Storm Eye troubles for a short time, and I'm constantly monitoring the situation there." "Then why did you travel thousands of miles to come to Sky City?" Ophelia tilted her head, her neck bending like a wheat stalk. "I came for the Wind Sprite." "Hey, hey, Wind Sprite." Ophelia laughed again. She seemed to enjoy laughing. "Why be so formal? What relationship do you have with her? Don't you think I already knew?" Saul didn't become embarrassed by Ophelia's teasing, but instead became somewhat serious. "You naturally know what relationship Pear and I have, but I'm not certain what relationship you have with the wind sprite." One sentence made the playful smile disappear from Ophelia's face. "Oh, you're blaming me for letting others send my own sister to the sky." Ophelia didn't get angry but sighed lightly. What choice did I have? Payer had long been targeted by the Stargate Council. According to plan, she was originally supposed to become Clark's stepping stone for advancement, but unfortunately Clark wasn't capable enough and died at someone else's hands. She glanced sideways at Saul. "You should know that someone too. Thinking about it now, besides him, who else would be so decisive?" Could Ophelia have already guessed that Gorsa was the one who killed Clark? Would the Stargate Council and Tribunal also discover this? Since their last parting, Gorsa had said he was going to advance to 4th rank and hadn't been heard from since. Saul didn't doubt whether he could advance to 4th rank, but worried whether he would be schemed against again. Ophelia lightly probed Saul with that comment. Seeing him lost in thought about something, she continued, "Although Payer escaped disaster due to Clark's death, the Council, having failed in their plan, didn't intend to truly let her go. No choice. Who told her she carries a small amount of wind sprite bloodline? That's too easy to be targeted." Thinking about it now, when the Stargate Council and Tribunal agreed to help Payer advance to 3rd rank and reside in the borderland, they probably already planned how to use her later. After listening, Saul didn't argue but asked, "According to what you're saying, if not forced by circumstances, you wouldn't want to sacrifice Payer?" "Of course." "Then your feelings for Payer are actually quite good. We do have some bloodline from the same man in our bodies." Saul clapped his hands. "Then, if there's a chance to bring Payer back, would you be willing to help me with a small favor?" Ophelia slowly straightened her neck. "Oh, so you were waiting for me at this point." Saul immediately felt mental pressure like a boulder crushing down on him, making his body sway twice. This pressure came not only from in front, but also from behind, from those identically shaped white porcelain bottles. "Actually, this would be a good attempt for you too," Saul said under pressure. "After all, Payer is now among the stars, and I think you should be very interested in that side." Ophelia wasn't moved. "I do yearn for the stars, but that side is also very dangerous, completely beyond my control, and just the attempt to bring Payer back could attract very dangerous enemies. Moreover, Payer might not even have a corpse left over there." Ophelia was right about this. The other side of the stars was very dangerous, and Payer really didn't even have a corpse left. Saul wasn't in a hurry. "What if I said I've already contacted Payer once, and she's temporarily not in danger over there? Would you be willing to take a risk?" Ophelia's head suddenly extended in front of Saul, her thin and pale neck making several turns in the air. "You contacted the world beyond the stars. How did you do it? Do you control another Stargate?" Saul leaned back slightly, avoiding Ophelia's beautiful yet terrifying head. "I established a special relationship connection with Payer and briefly communicated once. But when I tried to contact her again later, I couldn't do it anymore." Saul turned his head and unhesitatingly leaned close to the left ear of the head-only Ophelia, whispering softly, "Lady Ophelia, actually I'm also very curious about the world beyond the stars, so how about we cooperate?" Chapter 758, Ophelia's Commission. After the Dark Moon era, the path for wizards to advance to 5th rank and travel to other worlds had been severed. But even until the lunar calendar, the remaining 4th rank wizards in the world hadn't given up searching for advancement methods. The Tribunal pinned their hopes on the culprit, the Abyssal Eye. The Stargate Council held onto the only Stargate and refused to let go. As an independent force, Sky City Lord Ophelia had been searching for ancient wizards' advancement methods. She believed that even if this world had changed, the paths that had once produced 5th rank wizards wouldn't be completely cut off. Through the efforts of all wizards in Sky City searching desperately and studying frantically, Ophelia had also obtained several suspected fifth-rank wizard advancement methods. However, these methods either lacked important materials, appeared too dangerous with certain death, or lacked corresponding magical resources. Actually, sometimes I envy those ancient ignorant people's belief in deities. Do you know about Bitch? After expressing many sentiments, Ophelia casually asked Saul. I've heard some things. Originally, Bitchai's living sacrifices weren't the simple atrocities we imagine. They contained many magical principles, but now they've all been lost, leaving only a few small tricks and killings purely for venting. Ophelia's neck slowly shortened, her head returning to the white porcelain bottle, spinning in place like a screw twice before slowly turning to face Saul and stopping. You hope I can help you contact Payer. Normally, I'd also very much want to connect with that prismatic world you mentioned. But right now, the ancient wizard advancement path I've been pursuing finally has clues, so I can't spare the energy to help you temporarily. How long would you need to free up time? Who can say for certain with magical experiments? Maybe a year, maybe 100 years. I won't easily give up until I'm certain I can't continue. Saul had considered that Ophelia might not help him. Although he had backup candidates, he wanted to try harder to persuade her. Is the prismatic world's attraction less than that of a fifth-rank wizard to you? Ophelia chuckled. If the prismatic world is indeed as you describe, it could reach sixth-rank levels, but that also means powerful, dangerous, and irresistible. For me, a fifth-rank advancement plan is more practical. Saul wanted to propose conditions, but saw his diary stir. He then swallowed the words he was about to say and drew a wisp of spirit body from his temple. Ophelia watched Saul's movements, obviously still quite concerned about the conditions he was about to propose. However, Saul pulled Payer, who had been in black page state, out from the diary. The spirit body fell, writhed into shape, becoming a woman with two heads. One head was Payer's appearance, looking up and glaring fiercely at Ophelia with a vicious expression. The other head was Narella, facing Ophelia for the first time and very uneasy, constantly seeking Saul with sidelong glances. Saul indicated she needn't worry and to see what Payer would say. Upon seeing Payer, Ophelia was somewhat surprised but also somewhat understanding. No wonder Saul found me so quickly, so you reminded him. Payer snorted coldly. So drop that pretentious act. Others might not know your situation, but don't I know? The other head, Narella, hung low with her chin almost touching her chest. Payer continued speaking, not caring about publicly exposing Ophelia's secrets. If those ancient wizard advancement methods were really suitable for you, would you still directly sell me out to participate in Stargate research? Payer gritted her teeth. I never went to the Stargate. They could only understand me through you. If you hadn't told the Stargate Council people all my information, how would they dare directly make that fool an experimental subject for exploring Stargate coordinates? She really is a fool, Ophelia said quietly. I already told her not to separate her emotions when separating consciousness, yet she still split off someone like you. Looking at it now, you already have quite independent consciousness. Even if Payer comes back, she probably can't reabsorb you. Even if she comes back, I'll devour her. With that brain of hers, how could she survive in this world? Payer puffed out her chest, seemingly wanting to step forward, but the body's control rights still belonged to Narella. This second-rank small wizard didn't dare face Ophelia directly, her feet firmly planted in place. Payer's movement failed, so she could only glare fiercely at Narella. Fortunately, she remembered her mission for coming out. Anyway, you don't need to pretend in front of me. Even if you're really researching fifth-rank advancement methods, with so many clones studying, how could you possibly have no time to connect to the prismatic world? Whatever conditions you have, state them quickly. If you're too slow, I'll have Saul go find Alec directly. His interest in the prismatic world definitely won't be less than yours." Ophelia wasn't angry. "You're right. I am quite interested in the prismatic world, but I really am very busy right now." She looked at Saul. "If you really want me to help you attempt connecting to the prismatic world now, you need to accept a commission. Only if you take this commission can I spare some energy to help you communicate with the prismatic world." Saul nodded. "That can be considered a transaction. What specifically is it? Please tell me." Ophelia suddenly lowered her voice. "Sky City recently lost a third-rank wizard. He drowned." Drowned? For some reason, Saul suddenly thought of the white porcelain kitten he'd seen on the airship. Could that craft actually have such power, capable of killing even third-rank wizards? Saul's expression didn't change. "Do you want me to investigate the cause of that third-rank wizard's death?" "Not only that, he died while helping me research an ancient wizard advancement method, but he betrayed me." Ophelia's voice showed no discernible anger about her subordinate's betrayal. "The bitch I mentioned to you were savage people who enjoyed killing and bloodshed in ancient times. The advancement method I found this time comes from what was called the water god in ancient times." Saul thought, an existence called the water god. It seems Ophelia doesn't really acknowledge the water god. Makes sense, in the chaos realm now, aren't I also called the death judge? If Noah were bolder, I'd be the death god by now. Ophelia either didn't notice Saul's wandering thoughts or didn't care if she did. She continued, "The dead third-rank wizard was named Crumb. He was formerly a wizard from the Nefrit continent. After he came to seek refuge in Sky City, I didn't hold his origins against him and gave him several biographies related to the ancient water god to research. Who knew he actually discovered traces of the ancient water god? However, after discovering the water god's remaining traces, he didn't report to me but instead found a room with 6 walls frozen in ice and secretly researched inside." Peyer suddenly burst into laughter, saying mercilessly, "Looks like your subordinate already found a way to avoid your surveillance. A frozen room with no liquid water, ha ha ha. MMPH. Peyer's laughter suddenly stopped because Narella, at Saul's signal, directly covered her mouth with her hand. Saul turned around. "Please continue." Chapter 759, Investigation. Ophelia remained calmly smiling. Saul believed that beneath those crimson lips, she wasn't gritting her teeth in rage. But the Sky City Lord still remained silent for several seconds before continuing. "Yes, Crumb did indeed find a way to evade my surveillance within Sky City's white glass palace." She looked at Peyer with her mouth covered. "But I also thought of a countermeasure. Would you like to hear it?" Peyer widened her eyes and made 2 muffled sounds. "But I don't want to tell you." Ophelia's single sentence made Peyer's eyes flash with menace again. Saul stepped forward to block Peyer. "Do you want me to continue helping you research the water god biography that Crumb was reading before his death?" Ophelia shook her head. "Although you're a genius, water god knowledge isn't your area of expertise. Having you help me research would be worse than finding a few ordinary scholars. In fact, I only found the first half of the biography on the dead Crumb. He hid the second half." She couldn't help but raise her head a bit, revealing that soft, snow-white curved neck that just didn't look like a neck. "I'm currently secretly searching for the second half of those biographies, while sealing most exit routes from the city and monitoring the entire island for anomalies. So I currently have no way to cooperate with you." "I understand what you mean." At this point, Saul finally knew what Ophelia was busy with. Investigate Crumb's cause of death and retrieve the hidden biography. Once these are complete, can you help me contact Peyer in the prismatic world? Ophelia finally nodded. "Then our transaction can begin." Saul nodded and bowed, then turned to leave. "Please have someone take me to the location where Crumb died." Saul walked to the great doors, which were opened by invisible hands. Outside sunlight tentatively shone in. Ona, the female wizard who had led Saul here, still stood by the door like a serene statue. Ona, you'll temporarily serve as Saul's assistant. Except for top-secret information, everything can be accessed by him. Ona, who had been able to naturally bow to Ophelia's clones before, trembled all over, then stiffly bent her knees. Yes, City Lord. Saul looked back, but only the white porcelain bottle remained on the throne. The Sky City Lord inside had vanished. She had probably burrowed back inside. The great doors immediately closed after Saul left the main hall. Lord Saul, what do you need to do now? I want to see where Wizard Crumb died. Ona was stunned, and her smile wasn't as pleasant as before. So the city lord entrusted this task to you. Saul observed Ona's expression. When she was almost sweating, he said, "Does Crumb's death have anything to do with you?" "No, it doesn't." Ona lowered her head and was not panicking. However, she was nervous and afraid about something else. The place where Crumb died was in a room inside the white glass palace. This area was rather remote, mainly used for storing infrequently used materials and goods. As soon as Saul and Ona approached, they felt a cold air. He discovered a small room ahead with thick frost on the inner side of the door. The cold air was emanating from inside the room. Saul didn't enter immediately but looked around. Although this room can block City Lord Ophelia's surveillance, wouldn't appearing in such a remote place arouse suspicion? No, there are many similar places in the castle. Having walked this far, Ona had organized her emotions and answered Saul with a bright smile. Many wizards live in the white glass palace. Most are scholars very skilled at research, but they also have very eccentric temperaments. Sometimes they just like to run to strange places to research and read, saying it inspires them. So the castle has many rooms specifically to provide research spaces for them. Saul nodded slowly. Plus, the city lord can monitor the entire white glass palace and even sense the entire Sky City, so she doesn't care where these wizards research. She just didn't expect someone to use an ice-sealed room to block her surveillance. Ona's face paled slightly, unconsciously lowering her voice. So we've been secretly investigating Crumb's cause of death and where he took the stolen items. Normally, this place can't be entered unless I brought you here. Recalling the journey here, Saul hadn't noticed any facilities preventing others from entering, not even mental suggestion devices. But he quickly understood how City Lord Ophelia prevented others from entering. Because while they were talking, an Ophelia in a sea blue gown walked out from that ice-sealed house. City Lord, Ona immediately bowed. Facing the dress-wearing Ophelia, her emotions weren't as tense as before. She seemed to treat the Ophelias commonly seen throughout the castle, and the Ophelia in the main hall, with only her head and neck exposed as two different people. Wait outside. The blue-gowned Ophelia didn't smile, but she also didn't have the oppressive feeling of the Ophelia in the white porcelain bottle. "Hello, City Lord." Saul stepped forward and spoke actively. The Ophelia before him still nodded elegantly, then turned to enter the ice-sealed room. "Come in and talk." Saul followed her in. The room's door immediately closed, turning this place back into a frozen world. The ice-sealed room could block Ophelia's surveillance, but she couldn't possibly let Saul investigate without monitoring his movements. So this blue-gowned Ophelia was specifically left in the room, a more precise, independently transmitting surveillance probe. "It seems you know why I'm here. Is this your previous preparation or a message transmitted from the main hall?" Saul asked curiously. The Ophelia before him showed no significant emotional change. "Are you asking whether information transmission between different Ophelias is synchronized?" Saul held his chin, not denying it. "But I have no obligation to tell you. Ophelia said while walking to one side of the room, clearing the inner space and letting Saul see the corpse in the inner rest room. Although dead for over 2 days, the body lying on the ground was still fresh, without the bloodless pallor typical of the deceased. Saul crouched down and pressed Crumb's skin with his fingertip. It was soft and elastic, completely unaffected by the ice-cold air here. Saul lifted his hand and pressed down again, but this time his fingertip became semi-transparent gray skin. The skin immediately sank into the corpse upon contact, with only the bone remaining outside. The blue-gowned Ophelia stood behind Saul, quietly watching his actions, not hiding her surveillance intentions at all. Saul slowly closed his eyes. Glub glub. He heard the sound of bubbles in water. After a moment, Saul opened his eyes and stood up again, facing Ophelia. His body indeed died from drowning. But the water in his body is different from the stored water here. Saul was somewhat puzzled. The water has high salt content and some algae. It seems to come from the deep sea. He turned back to look at Crumb's corpse that appeared alive on the surface. His soul only retains a little consciousness. The main body has disappeared. In his remaining consciousness, I heard the sound of water. Chapter 760, Saul's Value. Would there be any place nearby that stores seawater? Saul took some tissue samples from Crumb's body, planning to test them again later. The sea is directly below Sky City. That's a bit far. We don't have a habit of storing seawater, but you can look for yourself. Ophelia showed no intention of helping, but you cannot reveal Crumb's death or the missing biography. Got it, Saul made an okay gesture, not caring whether Ophelia could understand it. Can I see that biography about the water god? Saul explained. I want to see what the second half of the biography might look like. The blue-gowned Ophelia raised her hand, and a bubble appeared in her palm. Within the bubble appeared a stone tablet. The tablet was grayish, with many damaged edges. In some small cracks there seemed to be dark green plants. Whether moss or algae was unclear. Dense small characters were carved on the stone tablet. These characters had relatively simple construction, somewhat similar to Highland wizard languages. The bubble only showed an image of the biography. Saul couldn't sense any powerful or mysterious aura from it. Is this what the second half of the biography looks like? No, this is the first half. The second half is already unknown in what form. Crumb was searched every time he entered or left the White Glass Palace. The second half couldn't have been taken out intact. Could it be hidden somewhere in the White Glass Palace? Saul speculated. Ophelia looked at Saul quietly. What do you think? Well, he still couldn't underestimate a fourth-rank wizard's capabilities. Since it required Ophelia to expend considerable energy searching, the other party must have hidden it very deeply. Saul took out his diary again. When the dark red hardcover book appeared in Saul's palm, Ophelia standing nearby flickered in her eyes before quickly returning to her normal expressionless state. Saul didn't observe the expressions of those nearby, focusing on the straight lines extending from the diary to various corners of the room. The emanating lines turned the objects around Saul into linear constructs. But only Ophelia standing beside him had a strange form. She wasn't straight lines but wavy lines, and these wavy lines precisely avoided the straight lines emanating from the diary. If Saul wanted, he could also make the diary's lines entangle with Ophelia's wavy lines. But this would definitely consume a large amount of the diary's energy, and might not even find any clues from Ophelia. The diary's death lines also didn't find Crumb's straight line here. Either Crumb's death line had already dissipated and wouldn't have obvious effects on people here, or someone had erased traces of Crumb's death. The clues seemed to completely break here. Although drowning in a place without water was bizarre, for wizards, this wasn't impossible. Saul didn't know the people here well enough, and had almost no leads for the moment. Actually, as a fourth-rank wizard and monitor of the White Glass Palace, Ophelia was truly the most suitable person to investigate Crumb's cause of death and the Water God biography's whereabouts. However, Saul wasn't really completely without leads. He put away the diary and said with apparent confidence, "Since there are no more clues in the White Glass Palace, next I'll search within Sky City." Ophelia couldn't see what Saul had found. "You have leads." Many clues are actually details we've overlooked. These details only become clues when we obtain specific information, so I can only say I need to acquire more information. What other information do you need? Currently, I'd like to see that Water God biography. Saul thought Ophelia would hesitate, but she immediately agreed. "I'll have Ona arrange a room for you and send the first half of the biography to your room. You'll have one night to read it. I'll retrieve it the next morning." Saul raised his hand. "No, lodging isn't necessary, and viewing the Water God biography won't take all night. I'm not interested in the Water God's advancement method. I just want to understand possibly involved details." Ophelia stared at Saul, seemingly wanting to confirm whether he was truly uninterested. A method with a chance of advancing to fifth rank. Even if Saul was only a third-rank wizard, how could he truly be uninterested? But in the next hour, Saul really did just flip through the Water God biography that another Ophelia brought outside the ice house, then left the White Glass Palace by flying carriage. Before Saul left, he gave Ophelia his method for contacting the prismatic world. As part of their transaction, she would first study the knowledge Saul provided, while he investigated Crumb and the second half of the biography. The two would subsequently communicate progress and attempt to contact Pear in the prismatic world. After Saul left, Ona, who had seen him off, returned to the room where Crumb died. Her face no longer had the generous, standardized smile she wore with Saul, but showed puzzlement as she quietly asked the Ophelia there, "City Lord, isn't Saul a third-rank wizard from the borderland? Why can he leave the borderland?" Ophelia glanced at the approaching Ona and spoke in a flat voice. "His advancement to third rank didn't truly rely on Stargate resources. Moreover, he alone can resolve a storm eye. This is something the previous 3 third ranks in the borderland couldn't do. Such a genius would definitely be courted by both the Tribunal and Stargate Council. It just depends on their courting intensity and methods." Ona leaned forward slightly. "Should we also court him?" Ophelia supported one arm with her hand, her upright palm gently caressing her cheek. "That depends on what value he has for us." Ophelia smiled, but her smile contained no joyful emotion. After leaving the White Glass Palace by flying carriage, Saul immediately returned to the airship's port square. Under the awning where he had stopped during the day, he unsurprisingly saw a cat paw-shaped stone. The claw tip pointed directly at a small alley. That's right. When Saul met Ona, he had left Kate behind at the original location, disguised as a little kitten. The other party had obviously only been interested in Saul, not even glancing at Orange Cat Kate. Kate had stayed to execute Saul's mission, tracking that attendant and finding the white porcelain kitten. Compared to meeting a fourth-rank wizard, he obviously preferred bullying ordinary people. While following the markers Kate had left, a voice sounded within Saul. "Brother Saul, aren't you anxious to search for the Water God biography? Are you really going to track that attendant from the airship?" Penny didn't quite understand. She thought a white porcelain cat that could kill ordinary people and might carry curses had what attraction that could make Saul, a third-rank wizard, set aside Ophelia's commission to investigate first. That white porcelain cat that brings luck isn't as ordinary as it appears on the surface. I've observed it several times without discovering any magical power or curses on it. But when Merchant Mike threw the dice for the third time, I vaguely sensed power emanating from it. weak and hidden, but such inconspicuous power could make that wealthy merchant beat me. Saul strode forward. To remain hidden, he didn't use teleportation. This is what interests me most about it.